Welcome, everyone. I'm Janice Searles-Jones, the CEO of Ocean Conservancy, and it is my great honor to open today's Ocean Climate Ambition Summit. Before we begin, I want to thank all of our speakers, all of you for joining, and all of the country hosts of this event: Belgium, Belize, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Fiji, France, Indonesia, Mexico, Norway, Panama, Seychelles, Spain, and Sweden. Thanks to all of you for your continued leadership on ocean and climate action. Although the UN Climate Summit, COP26, has been postponed until November, we continue to face the devastating impacts of climate change on our communities, our ecosystems, and our economies. And that is the reason for today's discussion: to come together to chart the path forward on rapidly eliminating greenhouse gas pollution, and to fully leverage the power of ocean-based climate solutions for the benefit of our ocean and all the communities that depend on it. Today, ministers and ambassadors from around the globe will discuss issues from climate ambition to multilateral cooperation. And tomorrow, we'll have a series of deep dive conversations on specific ocean-based climate solutions, such as reducing carbon pollution from shipping, creating climate-ready fisheries, and protecting and restoring blue ecosystems. Those sessions will include ample opportunity for audience engagement. Over the past several years, the momentum on ocean climate action has been a major bright spot. In 2019, Chile hosted COP25, known as the Blue COP, which included the first ever ocean section in a COP decision and mandated an initial dialogue on ocean and climate action at the end of 2020. Many of the countries here today were directly responsible for that success, and as an ocean advocate, I thank you. And today, as we look ahead into 2021, I look forward to hearing from our many distinguished speakers. I look forward to continue working with the Friends of the Ocean and Climate countries, and I look forward to an outcome at COP26 that protects our ocean, our planet, and our communities, and particularly one that firmly puts the needs of communities historically marginalized and currently hit hardest by climate change front and center. I'd now like to welcome Elizabeth Cousins, President and CEO of the United Nations Foundation. Elizabeth, thank you for co-organizing this event.
Thank you so much, Janice, for the kind introduction. Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends, I'm Elizabeth Cousins. I am the President and CEO of the UN Foundation, and I am delighted to join the Friends of Ocean and Climate, Janice and her amazing team at the Ocean Conservancy, and all of the tremendous partners who have worked to organize this Ocean Climate Ambition Summit in welcoming you today. For more than 20 years, the UN Foundation has worked with the United Nations to help take on the world's biggest challenges, and none is bigger than the health of our planet and the urgency of securing a blue-green future that will sustain our lives and livelihoods for generations to come. Today, we are honored to be joined by numerous distinguished guests who understand well that the health of our planet depends on the health of our ocean. I'm particularly pleased that among them, we will be joined shortly by a truly dedicated public servant, my former boss, and the first ever presidential climate envoy of the United States, Secretary John Kerry. The challenges we face are immense, but in 2021, there is also no shortage of opportunities to address the interlinked crises of the ocean and climate. This year, countries have a fresh opportunity to integrate ocean-based solutions into their nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. We can set strong, new global targets for biodiversity protection. We can finish the work of a global agreement to protect the high seas. We can also accelerate the transition of emissions-intensive sectors that disproportionately impact the ocean and climate, like shipping, where important work is already underway, including the Getting to Zero coalition that the maritime industry began at the Secretary General's Climate Action Summit in 2019. And we can seize this moment to redouble our efforts to build greater resilience to the impacts we are already seeing, from sea level rise and coastal erosion to fisheries migration to essential livelihoods. The Secretary General just Monday called for 50% of global climate finance to be devoted to adaptation, and that is a good place to start. So it is my honor again to welcome you all and to introduce the distinguished hosts of this event, the chairs of the Friends of Ocean and Climate. Her Excellency Isabella Lövin, the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, and His Excellency Ambassador Satyendra Prasad, the Permanent Representative of Fiji to the United Nations. Fiji and Sweden, as everyone here knows, have played an absolutely vital role in building understanding and building support for a holistic approach to the ocean and climate emergency we face. And we are grateful for their leadership and for their presence here today. So thank you both again for hosting this important discussion. And it is my real pleasure now to turn the floor over to Ambassador Prasad. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair and Cousins and co-conveners of this session. How delighted I am to join you at the start of this fantastic event today. As you are all aware, the ocean plays a fundamental role in sustaining livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people throughout the world. People across the Pacific have since time immemorial relied on the oceans for their survival and for their sustenance. And sea level rise, deoxygenation, ocean acidification, amongst others, are not only destroying their ecosystems, but altering the very human and ocean relationship matrix. NOAA estimates that in addition to that, 80% of pollution of marine environment comes from land-based sources. This is compounded by greenhouse gas emissions, which are absorbed by the oceans. And science appears to be telling us, though not very conclusively yet, that the capacity of oceans to continue to absorb the atmospheric carbon may be coming to an end. And this will have even more devastating consequences for marine ecosystems, for coral reefs, for marine resources, and most important, for the health of people across the Pacific and indeed across the world. Investments in the restoration and conservation of mangroves, seagrass, which function as carbon sinks, contribute greatly to mitigation potential of oceans. And Fiji has now incorporated a blue component within its nationally determined contributions. We will go further and we'll lock this into a oceans policy, and I hope by the end of this year into a climate act as well. And this shows how critical oceans are, not only to the ecosystems, but to our net zero ambition. I urge all countries who have not integrated oceans into their NDCs to do so. This is the time. It is crucial, therefore, that the oceans agenda be brought into the mainstream of the UNFCCC frameworks, as we have done so with our national laws and national frameworks. The global frameworks must respond in parallel if we are not to lose the gains that are beginning to be made. A very significant, as President Cousins had said, outcome of COP25 was that the oceans and climate change dialogue has been brought into play. This was significant progress. This sets a fantastic background for better understanding of how ocean features in the overall effort towards net zero and the substantial role of oceans in the overall net zero, or even 1.5 target. we will lose the climate battle if we lose the oceans battle. Fiji highlighted, together with Sweden and all of you here, the co-conveners, the need for an ongoing dialogue where we can stretch the limits and ensure that the oceans climate nexus is discussed and developed further, shaped in a substantive way. This dialogue must be locked into a work program, we think, at the UNFCCC, and we therefore look with great hope and determination to COP26. Beyond this, ocean action needs to be linked to discussions about climate finance. The two cannot be discussed separately. And at the UN, at GCF, at the MDBs, at the IFIs, blue finance and bringing blue finance into the mainstream needs to be pursued far more centrally than has been the case. 2021 marks the beginning of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science. On the science we need for the oceans we want, climate action cannot wait for research, but we must work in parallel. As the science develops, we should be taking substantive actions, oceans actions based on existing data, research, as well as generating greater demand for new data, as well as for new innovation. I take, Chairs, this opportunity to also welcome Fiji's dear friend, the Presidential Climate Envoy, Senator Kerry, as well as the United States to this discussion today, but to the Paris Agreement. US, as many of you know, is also a Pacific state. It is part of the Blue Pacific, and we hope to work together with its leadership in ensuring a greater protection and better stewardship of the vast Blue Pacific of which we are part. It is my very pleasant honor to now introduce the next speaker, another dear friend, Deputy Prime Minister Isabella Lövin, with whom Fiji has worked so well in the past in ensuring that we have the first Oceans Conference and in ensuring that the second Oceans Conference makes a quantum leap forward in all the aspiration that we had worked on in setting together some years back. I thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. Lövin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Ambassador, and it's a real pleasure to see you and hear you and remember the great success of the UN Oceans Conference that Fiji and Sweden co-hosted a few years ago. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's a real honor to welcome you all to this event and a great pleasure to cooperate with colleagues from all parts of the world, linked together by our one and only ocean. We have joined forces to highlight again and again that measuring temperature and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will only give us half of the story. The warming, expanding, acidifying ocean is always the flip side of the coin. Through various initiatives like Because the Ocean and Ocean Pathway, Sweden and our co-hosting countries and organizations strive, first of all, to raise awareness of the ocean and climate nexus. Secondly, to increase mitigation and adaptations ambitions through ocean-based measures. And lastly, to find a home for the ocean in the UNFCCC. The mandated Ocean Climate Dialogue under the UNFCCC was held in December last year. Parties and non-party stakeholders discussed how ocean and coastal zones can be integrated into technical measures, work programs and mechanisms on climate adaptation and resilience. Experts suggested how ocean science, data and indicators could be integrated into climate research, observations, reporting and global stocktake. Now, recent reports show that ocean-based sectors could contribute to 1/5 of the greenhouse gas reductions needed to keep the world within the 1.5 degree target. Also, further actions are needed to mobilize resources and redirect finance to ocean and climate change action, and that was also highlighted during the dialogue. So now is the time to ramp up action. Sweden has recently requested our International Development Agency, SIDA, to step up its work with biodiversity. Life on land and below water must be at the heart of building back better and bluer, also when it comes to development cooperation. Biodiversity will now be integrated into all strategy work of SIDA. The long-term goals like protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030 or net zero emissions by mid-century must also be backed by concrete measures and decisions. So let's make 2021 the year when we decide to take the next crucial step in protecting the Antarctica, to establish marine protected areas in the Weddell Sea and East Antarctica, and by doing so, reaching the SDG 14.5. Let's secure that SDG 14 climbs from being one of the most underfunded SDGs to reach the average level of funding. Let's make 2021 the year when fossil fuels and fisheries subsidies are redirected to ocean-based clean energy or sustainable aquaponics instead. Today, we will plan for a better year than 2020, with raised ambitions, concrete actions, and strengthened partnerships in the run-up to the COP26. And this is also the year when we welcome old friends back in the game. Last week, we were all pleased to hear that the United States will be rejoining the Paris Agreement. And it's my great, great pleasure to introduce an old friend to the ocean, our special guest, the Honorable John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, and a long-standing and passionate friend of ocean and climate action. Secretary Kerry, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your generous introduction. I appreciate your great leadership. And I begin by apologizing that we have been absent. I know you know that many of us are deeply upset about what happened over the last years, but it's great to see that even in a virtual setting like this, you look at everyone gathered here and it underscores that the stewardship of the ocean is not just the personal passion of a few nations or one nation. It's a shared and mandatory responsibility for all of us. It's about recognizing a simple proposition, which I think we began to talk about at the first Oceans Conference that I had a privilege of hosting when I was secretary. And that proposition is that you cannot protect the oceans without solving climate change, and you can't solve climate change without protecting the oceans. For far, far too long, an ocean meeting was an ocean meeting, and a climate negotiation was just that, a climate negotiation, without people recognizing the interconnectedness and the majesty of the ecosystem. So we need to say goodbye to silos. When you're meeting about the oceans, you are meeting about the climate. And it is critical for us to recognize that the level of protection that we give is going to depend on our capacity coming together in this kind of a meeting, which I want to emphasize, excuse me, we do re-enter with a genuine sense of humility, because for 4 years, we've been absent from this vital dialogue, actually on the other side of it, I regret to say, as a nation, but not our people. Most of our states in the country have renewable portfolio laws. Most of the mayors in our country continue to abide by Paris. But we do know that for all of our industrial capacity as a nation, close to 90%, about 88, I guess, of all emissions come from outside our borders too. So the whole world has to come to this table together to solve this problem. I'm very proud that we're back in the effort, and I'm pleased to say that we happily will join together with you in this group of the Friends of the Ocean. We look forward to being a new member and part of this effort going forward. And obviously, it's important to underscore as we do make this effort to go forward that even if every country on earth or other than us moved separately, no one has the ability to solve this problem by themselves. China, which is 30% of all emissions, could go to zero tomorrow. It still doesn't solve the problem. So we have to do this because they are so closely integrated, ocean and the climate generally. So we have to do it not just for the future of marine life, but literally for the future of all life. We know that the single best and most important way in which we can protect the oceans is by raising ambition. All nations need to raise ambition, but particularly the major emitter countries. And that's the single most important thing. It means getting to net zero emissions as soon as we can, because that's the only way you can create a global recovery that is both climate and ocean smart. All you have to do is look at the impact of acidification as well as the warming of the ocean. And together you have a catastrophic consequence on the rest of the world. It's going to take a partnership, and it's going to be up to all of us to decide whether or not we adopt the ocean's policies and the practices that we know are needed, and whether or not, in the end, we do it in time. In the some 30 years or so that I've been working on this on all 7 continents, I can regrettably have to say that the stakes have only grown. We have to get more ambitious to act against the rising carbon dioxide levels from emissions that increase the ocean acidity and devastate coral reefs and change fishing stocks and result in the warming of the ocean as a whole, which in its turn has a negative impact on most ocean life. We have to get more ambitious to change the reality that a mere 5% of the ocean today, 5% only, has any form of protection. And frankly, sometimes I'm not sure I'm comfortable that it's called protection, because the reality is that really only about 2% is actually strongly protected. So solving climate change and saving the oceans is in fact the challenge of our time. And I regret to say to everybody, if you need motivation, here's the motivation. When we left Paris, we knew we weren't promising the world and our citizens that we were holding the Earth's temperature increase to 2 degrees centigrade, let alone 1.5. We knew that. It wasn't that we hit it. It's just that the best Paris could do was get every country to decide what it would do for itself. No mandates, no penalties, no enforcement. And each country signed up to the credit of 196 countries. But if every country that signed up to do something did what it said it would do, we are still rising to a temperature increase on planet Earth of about 3.7 to 4.5 degrees. Even if we do everything in Paris, we're still at 3.7. The problem is we're not only not doing everything in Paris, we see countries going up in their emissions. And that's why we are talking about temperatures in the 4 point something. It doesn't matter whether you're exact about it, because anything above 2 begins to be catastrophic, and certainly 3 and 3.7 are completely catastrophic. So we have to build our own kind of current, the current of politics, the current of reasonableness, the current of common sense, in order to keep for future generations the majestic blue jewel that covers 3/4 of our planet and sustains life around the equator from pole to pole. A lot of citizens don't know that 51% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. As friends of the ocean, we refuse, I think, all of us, to be the prisoners of history. Instead, we're going to turn the tide of history. And we need to go to Glasgow and make it absolutely clear that oceans are as integral a part of the effort to resolve the problem of climate, and climate is integral to resolve the problem of ocean, as any other things that we will choose to do. So we all have a job to do in this turning. It can be done. It is the greatest marketplace the world has ever known. And in the discovery of direct air capture or new battery storage that gets you 25, 30 days or more in the discovery of new hydrogen fuels, and all of these things that we will build out now in the United States to make us more climate friendly and capable of transferring energy from one part of the nation to the other, and building out charging stations and transitioning to electric vehicles. That future is worth millions upon millions of jobs and a remarkable plus up for our economies that need to recover from COVID-19. We can turn this current, we can create our own current, and we can do what we need to do to get the job done. It's a privilege to be with you, and I'm glad that the United States, under the leadership of Joe Biden, is back in Paris and back at this table.
Thank you so much, Secretary John Kerry, for your inspiring and very important remarks. And welcome back to the Paris Agreement, and we look forward to working together with you. And I think with your personal leadership, we will certainly make sure that the current will turn, and that we will also include the ocean in the climate work. So with that said, we now turn to, thank you, to a message from Lord Zach Goldsmith of the United Kingdom about priorities for their presidency of COP26. The floor is yours.
Thank you to the organizers, to the Ocean Conservancy, the Friends of the Ocean and Climate Group, and to our host. It's great to see so many countries from all over the world working together on this crucially important summit. And I'm delighted to represent the COP26 presidency and to share our ambition to put nature and the ocean at the heart of our collective response to climate change. The level of engagement we saw at the Ocean Dialogue in December was really encouraging, and it's vital that we keep up that momentum. So I'd like to thank Substa for coordinating the dialogue and for producing such a thorough and comprehensive information note following it. It gave us all an invaluable overview of how we can help take ocean climate action forward, and we look forward to the summary report. Our commitment as COP presidency is to work with all parties to raise ambition ahead of what must be a decade of action, because the case couldn't be clearer. We know that if we're to have a future on this planet, we need to move fast towards net zero. And we know that there is no pathway to net zero that does not involve protecting and restoring nature on a massive scale, unlike anything that we've seen before. And that includes, of course, the ocean. Finally, we know that safeguarding and restoring the health of the marine environment requires us to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. Put simply, if our seas continue to become warmer and more acidic, we risk pushing the ocean past the point of no return, imperiling the very air we breathe, the food we eat, further destabilizing the climate and weather systems that we rely on, threatening millions of species and endangering the lives and livelihoods of billions of people right around the world. Sea levels are already rising. A third of marine mammals are currently threatened with extinction, and almost 2/3 of our coastal wetlands are degraded. So we need action now, and we need it on a global scale. The UK will use our G7 presidency to catalyze change, building on our global ocean alliance to protect at least 30% of the world's ocean by the end of this decade. I'm proud that we're also ocean co-chair of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People to protect at least 30% of the world's land as well by 2030. And that is essential to achieving the vision of the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, to put biodiversity on a road to recovery this decade. Some 80 countries are committed, and we invite other nations to join us. At the dialogue in December and at the One Planet Summit in Paris earlier this month, governments and civil society recognized the importance of climate action to the health of the ocean as the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development begins. And nature-based solutions to climate change include, of course, protecting and restoring marine ecosystems like mangroves, seagrasses, and salt marshes. They could provide up to a third of the most cost-effective mitigation that we need right now, as well as helping communities adapt to a changing world and rebuild their economies post-COVID. Governments have a unique ability and responsibility to step up now. And that's why our Prime Minister announced that the UK will spend at least £3 billion of our international climate finance on solutions that protect and restore nature and biodiversity over the next 5 years. And that includes our flagship £500 million Blue Planet Fund for marine conservation around the world. Our friends and neighbours in France have come forwards with ambitious new commitments of their own. And I know that many of you are working on your own announcements, and we eagerly look forward to hearing them. Because greatly increasing both public and private finance for nature is a priority for our COP26 presidency. And so is raising global ambition. And that means listening to and working with you, governments, NGOs, indigenous peoples, local communities, and businesses alike. And as we heard so powerfully at the Climate Ambition Summit in December, 65 million people living in small island developing states are already having to cope with the devastating impacts of climate change and ocean change. They face an existential threat to their future. So we will ensure that your voices are amplified. If we work together, as we must, to tackle these defining challenges of our time, then I believe that we can achieve a better future for every nation and for every generation to come. And it's a huge honor to the UK to be bringing the world together to help make that happen.
Hello, this is Andrés.
Thank you, Lord Goldsmith, not only for the UK's continued leadership, but for that clear call for continued ambition by way of concluding our keynote speakers. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, distinguished speakers and delegates, wherever this may find you. I hope you are all as well as can be. My name is Tom Hickey. I work for the Pew Charitable Trusts, and I'm very pleased to be helping moderate the first of 3 panels of speakers today. Panels which will cover action and ambition in national climate goals, advancing ocean climate issues in multilateral fora, and the role of non-state actor engagement. So throughout the first day, each of the panels will be preceded by intersessional remarks from speakers central within coalitions of ocean and climate leaders. And to that end, we're very pleased to welcome our first intersessional speaker, State Secretary and the Prime Minister of Norway's personal representative on the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, Jens Frolic Holt. State Secretary, thank you for agreeing to share your insights on the work of the high-level panel. A very warm welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, to the Ocean Conservative for organizing this high-level meeting and inviting me to provide remarks. I must say it's really a delight to hear the speakers before me. The US, obviously, back on stage when it comes to climate and oceans. The UK's commitment, Fiji and Sweden. There's just so many positive and important players going in the same direction now. So that makes me very excited about the future that we have ahead and the big job that we need to do for both climate and ocean issues. So I'm going to briefly talk about the ocean panel, which was co-chaired by Norway's Prime Minister Erna Solberg and the then President of Palau, Tommy Remendesau. The panel launched its report and a new ocean action agenda in December last year. The 14 countries of the panel will follow up on this ambitious agenda. And part of the agenda is to sustainably manage 100% of national waters, which is a bold target. The leaders have also encouraged other countries to join the effort, and that's something that we will be working on in the months and years to come, because we want to spread the good word and the good recommendations in this panel report, and yeah, increase number of followers. So one important focus for the panel from day one has been the grave consequences of greenhouse gas emissions for the oceans, such as acidification, sea level rise. It has been touched upon by several speakers. The impacts, of course, on the oceans and human life will be severe, and it further requires us to do more and act rather urgently to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, as well as pairing it with plans for sustainably manage the oceans, cope with risks, and also build resilience. So a clear message coming out from the ocean panel has been that while the ocean is a victim of climate change, the ocean is also a source for climate solutions. A special report commissioned by the panel shows that the ocean can provide up to 1/5 of the annual emissions reduction needed by 2050 to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This amounts to the staggering number of 11 gigatons CO2 equivalents. It's greater than the current emissions of coal-powered plants worldwide. And this report has several recommendations, and including a call to ocean-based climate action. And I will highlight 4 proposed actions from the panel. First, we need to scale up ocean-based renewable energy, such as offshore wind. It's an alternative to fossil fuels, and it has the potential to cut emissions by 5.4 gigatons by 2050. That's the equivalent of taking 1 billion cars off the road each year. Secondly, we need to ramp up ambitions to green and decarbonize shipping and marine transportation. Fortunately, many solutions exist. There's great commercial interest in finding green shipping solutions, and there's so much competition among the shipping players now that it's a beauty to see, but still there needs to be smart government policies in place and support to make sure that these solutions advance from just the idea and prototype stage to actually being implemented, because the global shipping industry, it's really huge. Thirdly, we must protect and restore mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes, and other coastal and marine ecosystem. If we increase nature's potential to sequester carbon, we will prevent significant quantities of greenhouse gas emissions from entering the atmosphere. And fourth, and lastly, we should increase development of low carbon sources of protein from the ocean. Seafood, seaweeds, kelp even. It will provide a more healthy and sustainable diet, while also easing emissions from land-based food production. And then, of course, the key for producing more food from the ocean is sustainable management based on scientific advice. In the bookshelf behind me, you can see a statue. It's a statue of a 19th century Norwegian lobster fisherman. On the west coast of Norway, there was a lot of lobster fishers, and then stocks dropped immensely, especially in the 1900s. And scientists told the government to restrict fishing, create sanctuaries, maximum sizes for when lobsters could be fished and eaten. Very, very detailed regulations, but people follow the regulations, and now the lobster stock is slowly improving, but it still shows that you need to base your policies on scientific advice, and also make the fishermen and the people living on the coast accept the rules and live by them. So that's sustainable management of ocean resources. It's a big topic, which I think will be more important in the years to come. At least we hope to put it right there at the top of the agenda, even though ocean planning or marine spatial planning is not maybe the most hottest of topics to talk about, even though I surely think so. And I think more and more people will open their eyes for this. So the Ocean Panel is committed to promoting these solutions, including in the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow. We have a very open hand to invite other governments and ocean industries to work with us. Do not hesitate to contact us at all. We hope that all governments include ocean-based solutions in their national climate commitments, and then in their actions from day to day to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have the knowledge, we have a great platform in the policy recommendations from the high-level panel. So the future is, I'd say, both exciting and bright. Thank you.
Thank you, State Secretary, for those thoughts and for Norway's leadership of the high-level panel in doing such critical work to shine a light on the paths forward. So we now turn to our first panel of the day, Action and Ambition in National Climate Goals. I think it's probably fair to say that both the keynote remarks and our intersessional speaker leave no ambiguity as to the determination at the highest levels of government to build on the momentum we have seen in recent years. Momentum to recognise the ocean not just as the victim of climate change, but in offering that range of potential solutions. As we've heard, solutions to the most important thing we can do within the climate sphere to protect the ocean, dramatically reducing emissions, offshore renewable energy, shipping emissions, and protecting and restoring coastal wetland blue carbon ecosystems, seagrass, salt marsh, and mangroves, as well as solutions to enhance adaptation efforts, climate smart fisheries management, and of course, solutions to enhance the resilience of the ocean to the impacts of climate change, such as the growing call to protect at least 30% of the world's oceans in the next decade. This momentum has in no small part been founded on and will continue to be driven by the willingness and leadership of individual countries to take action, the kind of action that not only helps to embrace these climate solutions within the waters of these respective countries, but in doing so generates shared learnings and further galvanizes global efforts. So in that context, fittingly, we're delighted to open with remarks from Minister Andrés Alemán from the Chilean Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Fittingly, because Chile, of course, utilized their presidency of COP25 in Madrid, the Blue COP, to further elevate the importance of the ocean, and then subsequently backed up that global call with their own action, submitting a revised nationally determined contribution in April of last year, which encompassed a range of ocean and coastal measures. Minister Alemán, you have the floor.
Hello, this is Andrés Alemán, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile. Let me start by thanking especially Sweden and Fiji for leading this discussion and for bringing us together in the crucial issue of ocean and climate. The ocean ambition has acquired great momentum in the international level. Chile has joined a number of important initiatives. The Blue Leaders, the High Ambition Coalition for People and Nature, and the Global Ocean Alliance, all of them calling to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. Chile has elevated ocean climate actions through our participation in the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, led by Norway and Palau. The panel allowed the joint effort of prominent leaders in the ocean space to help craft recommendations for the preservation of the ocean resources through a sustainable economy and prosperity. The panel outcome document includes concrete objectives which set a work plan for the coming years. In Madrid, thanks to the effort of all of us, the Friends of the Ocean, we were successful in the recognition of the important link between the ocean and climate change. As a result, the Blue COP adopted a concrete mandate to organize a dialogue to consider how to strengthen mitigation and adaptation action in the ocean. The dialogue took place last December, in a virtual format, which I had the honor to open. The dialogue was a first step under the UNFCCC to advance knowledge on how to protect the ocean to the adverse consequences of climate change. But it was clearly not enough to cover all the complex linkages between ocean and climate. As you know, 2020 was again the hottest year on the record, and the ocean has also suffered the consequences, reaching the hottest levels recorded in modern times. We have seen how ice caps continue melting and the sea level is rising. The current concentration of gases in the atmosphere makes almost inevitable that acidification will continue damaging numerous species, including corals. Chile has pushed for an ambitious agenda at the global level to face these challenges. But also we have pursued domestic policies that are our contribution to this global crisis. We have created marine protected areas that cover 43% of our jurisdictional waters, equivalent to more than 1.6 million square kilometers. We have also included the ocean in our NDC, which we communicated in April last year. This ocean component covers both mitigation and adaptation as co-benefits of the implementation of our marine protected areas system. Ocean pollution is another challenge that we need to tackle with decision and an innovative approach, working closely with the private sector. Recently, Chile banned single-use plastics, and last week, a regulation entered into force that will allow to recover and treat 90% of used and discarded vehicle wheels. All of these actions represent concrete steps. Chile walks the talk. These national efforts are aligned with what we are advocating in the international arena. During COP21, the first Because the Ocean Declaration was launched, where Chile and many others joined with the purpose of capturing the urgency of bringing the ocean into the climate change discussion. Then we launched a second Because the Ocean Declaration in COP22, which led in the coming years to an extensive agenda of activities and workshops about the possibilities and opportunities of including the ocean in NDCs. Now we see that it is time to update these efforts according to the experience gained and the current processes under the convention. That is why I want to announce that Chile is working on the proposal of a third Because the Ocean Declaration. This third declaration will be based on the latest scientific evidence and will consider topics that are urgent to be addressed, such as, number one, how we can ensure that the global stocktake to be organized in 2023 includes the ocean as a central component, and how it can inspire further action and ambition on the new round of NDCs to be presented by 2025. In second place, how we can work in strengthening technical assistance for the implementation of solutions for the ocean, and in that context, how we can think together on a funding strategy for ocean action. Thirdly, how we can make sure that COP26 in Glasgow addresses again the ocean climate nexus and adopts new mandates to continue with the work that we started with the Ocean and Climate Dialogue of last December. Our plan is to work very closely with all the members of this group of Friends of the Ocean in designing this new declaration. I believe that this can be the platform to bring these objectives to a successful outcome, gathering as many signatories as possible. I ask for your support in this task. The challenges are still daunting. The ocean is getting warmer, more acidic, and less productive, due to the effects of the climate change. That is why, as world ocean leaders, it is crucial that we join forces to raise the blue ambition. You can count with Chile for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. A brilliant way to start this session, and I defy anyone to challenge the idea that Chile's leadership is not grounded in walking the talk. Next, we're pleased to welcome Belgium Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the North Sea, Minister Vincent van Quickenborne. Belgium, who are at the forefront of global initiatives to enhance the resilience of our ocean, including support for a robust new United Nations treaty for the high seas. Minister, a very warm welcome. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Fiji and Sweden, for hosting this important summit. It is my honor to speak to you today as the newly appointed Belgium Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Justice and also Minister of the North Sea. As you all know, Belgium is not the biggest country on the planet, yet what we lack in size, we surely make up for in ambition. Although our coastline may only be 42 miles or 67 kilometers long, we are today in the world number 4 in terms of offshore wind energy. It is a testament to what we can achieve if we set our minds to do so, if we are ambitious. And today I would like to appeal to all of us to also be ambitious when it comes to protecting our oceans. You know, when I was a little boy, we spent our family holidays at the Belgian coast. And I remember looking over the sea, imagining the vast diversity of life and nature hidden beneath its waves, and how much of it we had yet to discover. Only a few years earlier, the famous deep sea explorer Jacques Picard had managed to reach the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench. But to this day, a staggering 80% of our oceans remain unexplored. Yet, there's a lot we can already do know. Our ocean is now warmer than at any time since measurements began. It is more acidic than at any time in the last 14 million years. And it is losing oxygen at an alarming rate. These changes are already affecting different elements of marine life, from the tiniest plankton to the largest whales. Many scientists have concluded that the single most important thing we can do for the oceans, beside cutting CO2 emissions, is to protect it from the adverse impact of major stress factors like overfishing, offshore oil development, pollution, and habitat destruction. We can do this by creating marine protected areas, true parks in the ocean where large-scale industrial activities are prohibited. That's why Belgium has taken the initiative in 2019 to join forces to make this possible, and it is called the Blue Leaders. The Blue Leaders are a group of ministers and heads of states from over 20 countries. We want to set a strong and new international goal of protecting 30% of the oceans by 2030, therefore 30 by 30. And we want to adopt a new robust treaty that can establish protected areas in the ocean beyond national jurisdiction. Along with other countries, we are organizing informal meetings, the so-called High Seas Treaty Dialogues, and they are aimed at preparing this treaty. These will be our goals for the UN Biodiversity COP26 in Glasgow. And I would like to warmly invite all of you who haven't yet done so to join the Blue Leaders. We are glad to see that with its new administration, the United States has rejoined in full force the global cause of battling climate change. Secretary Kerry, in true American spirit, you choose to do this not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And I would now ask you to be pioneers once more. Just like President Theodore Roosevelt established countless national parks To preserve America's pristine wilderness, we must now join forces in establishing international marine parks to preserve the biodiversity in our oceans for posterity. So that long after we are gone, generations of children can still look out across the ocean and rejoice in pondering the vast expanse of life hidden beneath its waves. Thank you, and Thomas, lots of success with the summit.
Thank you, Minister, for those brilliant words. And I would agree there certainly need not be any direct correlation between the size of the country and the size of its ambition. Next, we are joined by Panamanian Environment Minister Milciades Concepcion. Like Chile, Panama recently submitted an updated nationally determined contribution, which included a range of ocean measures, including those building on the existing national wetlands policy to protect and restore coastal blue carbon ecosystems. Minister, a very warm welcome. You have the floor.
Buenas tardes a todos. Los océanos y los ecosistemas costeros no solamente son importantes para las economías de los países a través de los beneficios que proporcionan para el turismo, el transporte, la pesca y el enriquecimiento de los medios de vida de las comunidades costeras. Juegan también un papel importante y transversal en la lucha contra el cambio climático. Estos ecosistemas están expuestos a una gran cantidad de impactos a causa de las actividades humanas que se agudizan con los efectos del cambio climático en términos de incremento de temperatura, acidificación de los océanos, intrusión salina, erosión costera y aumento del nivel del mar, entre otros, que afectan a las comunidades costeras, ecosistemas, infraestructuras y sistemas productivos, muchos de los cuales nuestro país ya está experimentando junto con cambios en los patrones de desarrollo social. Panamá, al ser un país bañado por dos océanos y rico en recursos marinos costeros, es consciente de la importancia de involucrar las soluciones basadas en los océanos dentro de las metas de ambición climática. Entre los instrumentos utilizados para la gestión costera, destaca la existencia de 5 zonas especiales de manejo de los recursos marinos costeros y al menos 46 áreas protegidas marinas. En este contexto, el país incrementó la ambición climática mediante la actualización de los compromisos contenidos en las contribuciones determinadas a nivel nacional, entregadas ante la Secretaría de la Convención Marco de las Naciones Unidas sobre Cambio Climático el pasado diciembre de 2020. La nueva CD1 de Panamá incluye 29 metas climáticas en distintos sectores de importancia socioeconómica, siendo uno de estos los sistemas marinos y costeros. El compromiso sectorial consiste en el fortalecimiento del manejo a través de 2 herramientas climáticas como la Guía Técnica del Cambio Climático para este sector y un manual de técnica de restauración para áreas degradadas de manglar que se enfocará en la restauración de áreas claves y corredores biológicos para fortalecer la conectividad, así como el diseño e implementación de soluciones basadas en naturaleza. En este mismo sentido, Panamá al 2022 integrará el carbono azul en el inventario nacional de gases de efectos de invernadero. Además de las contribuciones determinadas a nivel nacional, el país sigue trabajando para impulsar la protección, conservación y restauración de estos ecosistemas a través del desarrollo y actualización de herramientas de gestión estratégicas y políticas públicas como la Política Nacional de Océanos. Esta política ya cuenta con lineamiento claro de acción con el objetivo de crear conciencia sobre las consecuencias que la actividad humana tiene sobre los mares. El Ministerio de Ambiente de Panamá trabaja junto a la ONU Medio Ambiente para producir un plan de acción nacional sobre la basura marina, una serie de acciones que contribuyan en la reducción de los desechos que atentan contra la biodiversidad y los ecosistemas en costas, manglares y mares panameños. Este plan será uno de los primeros de la región solo realizado por Chile y Colombia y se está desarrollando con más de 40 organizaciones y entidades vinculadas al tema. Panamá lanzó su primera normativa para la protección y conservación de los pastos marinos. Dentro de esto, los arrecifes coralinos y los pastos marinos se mapearán por primera vez en el territorio de Panamá. Así tendremos una mayor protección legal y ambiental, disminuyendo el impacto del cambio climático. Nos estamos preparando para futuros encuentros. Panamá será sede en el 2022 de la Conferencia Mundial de Nuestros Océanos, un espacio que reúne a representantes de gobiernos, industrias, sociedad civil y academia para debatir acerca de las medidas para proteger los océanos y garantizar una gestión responsable de los recursos marinos y un crecimiento económico sostenible. Esta será una primera conferencia en nuestros océanos después de la entrada en vigor de los principales compromisos mundiales para los océanos en el marco del Objetivo de Desarrollo Sostenible, el Convenio sobre la Diversidad Biológica y el Acuerdo de París con el objetivo de impulsar una gestión sostenible y responsable de los plásticos. Como país nos adherimos a la Carta sobre Plásticos Oceánicos, el único marco mundial que adopta un enfoque global para abordar la contaminación por plásticos marinos y complementa la Agenda 2030 del Objetivo de Desarrollo Sostenible de las Naciones Unidas. Como parte de nuestro compromiso de construir la resiliencia del océano para hacerle frente mejor a los impactos de la crisis climática, Panamá se ha unido a los líderes azules y apoya la protección total del 30% del océano para 2030. Los líderes azul tratan de asegurar un nuevo objetivo ambicioso en la próxima conferencia de las partes en el Convenio sobre la Diversidad Biológica y se centran en un nuevo tratado sólido para conservar y proteger la alta mar. El océano es nuestra primera línea de defensa contra los impactos del cambio climático. Debemos proteger y conservar el océano para que pueda seguir prestando sus servicios de sostenimiento de la vida. Hago un llamado a otros países para que se unan con Panamá y a otros países de Blue Leader para lograr estos objetivos de conservación. Panamá seguirá promoviendo las prioridades nacionales de la economía azul a través de la planificación especial marina en el Caribe, el proyecto de protección de reservas de carbono en manglares y áreas protegidas y el diagnóstico participativo sobre afectaciones en medio de vida de la comunidad de Garachiné asociada a la erosión costera y elaboración de un plan, una estrategia y plan de acción comunitario, entre otros. Finalmente, deseamos instalar el mensaje de que es importante que los ciudadanos de nuestras naciones puedan comprender el rol que atañe a los océanos para enfrentar el cambio climático y sus efectos que probablemente continuarán a mayor escala. Es hora de incluir nuestros océanos en las estrategias nacionales para el desarrollo bajo en emisiones y la meta de neutralidad de carbono. Esta es una lucha donde todos debemos actuar. Estamos a tiempo. El futuro está en nuestras manos. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Minister Concepcion. It's wonderful to see Panama, like many countries, recognizing the full range of benefits for climate, for people, and for nature that the protection of coastal wetlands such as mangroves and seagrasses can deliver. And not just that, not just recognizing the potential of these benefits, but outlining specific goals to be pursued alongside both local communities and with regional partners, a real model for change. Finally, we will hear remarks from Danish Minister for the Environment, Lea Vermeulen, and Seychelles Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment Minister, Flavien Joubert, two countries whose leadership of the growing caucus of support to protect at least 30% of the world's oceans is underpinned by domestic action. Denmark, who are currently exploring new marine protections within their own waters, and of course Seychelles, one of the first countries to protect 30% of their own exclusive economic zone, alongside pioneering innovative models of conservation finance, and now looking to ocean-based solutions within their NDCs. Ministers, welcome.
Distinguished colleagues, participants, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for giving Denmark the opportunity to contribute to this important summit on ocean climate ambition. Protecting the environment and fighting climate change are key priorities for Denmark. Halting the dramatic loss of biodiversity and mitigating the swelling threats from climate change are the great challenges of our time. They're not easy tasks, but they are mandatory. Across the world, we're not only facing the threat of rising sea levels, but also of rising sea temperatures and an increasing acidification of the ocean environment, offsetting the delicate balances of marine life that we for generations had thought to be everlasting. The climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are interlinked. This means that many of the solutions can be as well. In order to create a more green and sustainable future, it is therefore crucial that we look into nature-based solutions. The year 2020 was kicked off as a super year for nature and climate. I hope that 2021 can be the new super year and that we ultimately can reach an ambitious agreement at CBD COP15. An agreement that will underline the importance of the ocean and climate nexus. There's no wavering or uncertainty when it comes to the science. We need to implement the Paris Agreement and set the world on course towards climate neutrality as soon as possible. This is the only way to heal our oceans, stop the corals from dying, fight hypoxia and acidification, and limit ocean warming. I'm therefore happy to announce that Denmark has joined the Global Ocean Alliance, Blue Leaders, and the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. And Denmark is ready to work for a global goal of 30% protected areas on land and in the oceans. As a country surrounded by the sea, one of our strong priorities in Denmark is protecting the marine environment. That is why we are right now exploring how we should designate new marine protected areas in Denmark. Areas that will help us reach good environmental status in the oceans, reduce the adverse effects of human activities, preserve fish stocks, and improve the ocean's resilience against climate change. Our national actions will contribute to the global initiatives and coalitions that call for 30% of global protection of the oceans. Denmark is in favor of an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework under the CBD. We support the target of protecting 30% of marine areas and stand behind the global 30 by 30 initiative that sets our planet on track to protect at least 30% of our oceans by 2030. We're happy that the current post-2020 framework already reflects this target. And as Minister of the Environment, I can assure you that Denmark is committed to ensuring its endorsement by the international community and its achievement afterwards. Internationally, Denmark also seeks the conclusion of an ambitious legally binding instrument on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. We know that marine protected areas not only increase the adaptation and resilience of species and habitats in response to climate change, but that the protection also strengthens the livelihoods of coastal communities. There are ongoing efforts to protect the oceans under the Convention on Biological Diversity, the international maritime organizations, and our regional sea conventions. There, we need to initiate strong actions for the oceans in order for them to become healthier, while taking into account the impacts of climate change. Denmark finds it crucial that the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 14, Life Below Water, is reinforced to protect and conserve marine and coastal ecosystems from pollution. The implementation of SDG 14 can contribute to minimizing the pressures of human activities on the marine environment. For Denmark, it is important that the Ocean and Climate Nexus is incorporated by all relevant international and regional organizations to achieve synergies between organizations. My hope is that the CBD post-2020 agreement can be for our nature what the Paris Agreement is for our climate. To achieve this, we must come together and work for an ambitious agreement at all international levels, including a global goal of 30% protected areas on land and sea. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Seychelles is an oceanic state comprising of more than 99% of ocean and less than 1% land. The importance of the ocean to the people of Seychelles cannot go unnoticed. Considering the scale of the climate change risk and all the challenges the ocean faces, the world is now calling for greater protection of the world's ocean. We recognize the benefits that the ocean provides in addressing climate change. Our blue carbon coastal wetlands, which include seagrass, mangroves, and salt marsh ecosystems, sequester vast amounts of carbon, as well as sustaining vital adaptation and ecosystem services for frontline communities. Seychelles has already designated 30% of its exclusive economic zone to protected areas. It is also in the process of developing its Marine Special Plan, or MSP, which will enable the country to tackle its sustainable development, including adapting to climate change. The coastal wetlands are some of the most threatened ecosystems globally. Protecting and restoring the coastal wetlands can therefore play a central role in tackling climate change. Seychelles' next nationally determined contribution will commit to pioneering new technologies to map seagrass ecosystems across our entire exclusive economic zone. We are pleased that Seychelles government and local institutions such as the Seychelles Climate Change Adaptation Trust and the University of Seychelles are working with international partners such as the Pew Trust, Oxford University, and the Nature Conservancy to further enhance Seychelles' long-term implementation capacities. To effectively protect and maintain these ecosystems, we must be able to monitor, measure, and manage the benefits they provide. The enormity and complexity of the challenges of our ocean require the support of existing as well as new partners. Seychelles is calling on the world to join us. The impacts of climate change are damaging communities and ecosystems worldwide. We need a healthy ocean to create a carbon-free and climate-resilient future. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, ministers. A wonderful way to close off this first panel of speakers. And it leaves me only to thank all of those speakers. The action and ambition of individual states is clearly the foundation on which to continue building momentum. And it is certainly heartening that the challenges we're all facing globally only seem to have made more acute the determination to recognize the role the ocean can play. And so we turn to the next of our intersessional speakers, the secretariat of the Because of the Ocean initiative, Mr. Rémi Parmentier. Rémi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the organizers for this kind invitation to say a few words on behalf of the Because the Ocean Initiative Secretariat. Our initiative was launched on the eve of COP21 in Paris. And over the last 5 years, it's been joined by 39 countries. It's been a long journey, and a great lineup of speakers today and tomorrow is a testimony to the progress achieved to break the silos that have separated for too long ocean and climate advocates, as Secretary Kerry just reminded us a while ago. This is very encouraging. Special thanks for their support because the ocean, go to the Principality of Monaco and to Chile's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the COP25 presidency, to Fiji's Ministry of Economy and the COP23 presidency, and to the Ministry for the Ecological Transition of Spain, among others. Our gratitude also goes to all our partners, including the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, the Ocean and Climate Platform, the Tara Ocean Foundation, IDRI, ICRI, the Pacific Community, the NDC Partnership, and Spain's Fundación Biodiversidad. The full list of signatories and partners is available at becausetheocean.org. The Because the Ocean initiative started in 2015 with 3 asks. First, that the IPCC should prepare a special report on the ocean and climate change, as originally proposed by the Principality of Monaco. Second, that the UN General Assembly should agree to convene a high-level UN Ocean Conference on the implementation of SDG 14, as originally proposed by the governments of Fiji and Sweden. And third, that an ocean action plan be developed under the UNFCCC with special emphasis on incorporating ocean-related measures in climate strategies, including NDCs. The IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere was launched in Monaco in September 2019, and the first UN conference took place in New York in June 2017. And we all hope that a second one will take place this year in Lisbon. And it can also be said that the ocean took center stage in Madrid during COP25, the Blue COP, under the joint leadership of Chile and Spain. Prior to COP25, governments, scientists, and NGO representatives took part in the Before the Blue COP workshops series organized by the Because the Ocean initiative, and which framed ocean-related measures in the areas of both mitigation and adaptation. That work is summarized in the Ocean for Climate report, which is still available on our website, together with all the papers submitted and discussed at these workshops. Like many of you also, we took part last month in the UNFCCC SAPSTA Ocean and Climate Dialogue mandated by COP25. And now we look forward to finishing the job with you in the run-up to COP26. The ocean is present in some of the enhanced NDCs which have been submitted last year, and some have been mentioned by previous speakers. And our expectation is that there will be more ocean elements in those that will be coming in the run-up to COP26. Talking mitigation in the ocean, first, we must harvest the blue energy from the ocean. Offshore wind energy, of course, but also waves, tidal currents and tidal range, thermal energy conversion, and salinity gradients. Second, we must also protect and restore blue carbon coastal wetland. And third, we must not forget also the greening of the shipping sector, for example, with hydrogen or with the wind engine. And to be more resilient to climate impact, Ocean and coasts beyond coastal wetlands also need more protection. But ocean protection is a part of climate protection, and it is not a substitute for mitigation. With this in mind, the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation has asked me to tell you today that we shall organize a meeting of the members of the Because the Ocean Initiative during the Monaco Ocean Week that will take place online between the 22nd and the 25th of March. A detailed announcement will be issued in a couple of weeks for this event, which will certainly be the opportunity also to discuss and develop the proposal that has been outlined by Minister Alamand from Chile just now about a third Because the Ocean declaration eventually. The Because the Ocean initiative has not met as a group since COP25. So the Ocean Climate Ambition meeting today and tomorrow is a great opportunity to take stock as part of our planning. And we thank you very much. Stay safe and keep the ocean safe.
Well, thank you, Remy, and welcome everyone to this next panel on the future of ocean and climate diplomacy. I'm Gwen Taraska, Director of the Climate Program at Ocean Conservancy, and it's my great honor to welcome Ambassador Prasad of Fiji, Ambassador Patricia Fuller of Canada, Sue Biniaz of the US Department of State, Ambassador Stéphane Cruzat of France, and Ambassador of Costa Rica to the United Nations, Rodrigo Carvazo Zeledon. As we know, ocean and climate issues historically have been somewhat siloed, despite the connections between the ocean and climate change. But there has been a growing movement among countries to create a new integrated approach, as we've seen today. In 2015, we saw Chile and others launch the first Because the Ocean Declaration. In 2017, we saw Fiji and Sweden launch the Ocean Pathway Partnership. And we've also seen the evolution of this umbrella group, the Friends of the Ocean and Climate, which has met since 2018 to discuss how to elevate ocean issues in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. Many of the countries hosting today's event were instrumental during the last UN Climate Summit, known as COP25, which achieved the first ever ocean section in a COP decision. That decision mandated an initial dialogue this past December among the parties to the Paris Agreement to discuss the power of ocean climate solutions and also the way forward in integrating ocean solutions into the international climate regime. Over this time, we've seen several priorities sort of come to the fore in the Friends of the Ocean and Climate discussions among countries. The first is, of course, the need to promote overall climate ambition in eliminating carbon pollution as sort of the single most important thing for ocean health. The second is the need to really take advantage of the range of sustainable ocean-based measures that can be applied in national climate goals, and that was the topic of the last session. The third is the need to integrate ocean issues across the multilateral work of the Paris Agreement itself. And the fourth is the need not only to create an ambitious and ocean-smart UNFCCC, but also to embed climate ambition across every international forum from the G20 to the International Maritime Organization. So this panel will look at those last 2 points. On the one hand, what is the way forward in terms of elevating ocean issues in the UNFCCC? And on the other hand, what do we need to see not only in the UNFCCC, but in other UN bodies and other multilateral fora as we work to preserve a habitable planet? In this session, we're lucky enough to have some of the leading countries that are working to be at the forefront of ocean and climate diplomacy on the world stage. And with that, let me turn it over to our speakers. And let's begin with you, Ambassador Prasad. Fiji has really been just sort of a North Star with respect to climate ambition. You've been a leader in launching the Ocean Pathway Partnership, in guiding the Friends of the Ocean and Climate Group, and in achieving the COP25 decision text. So wondering if you could talk about which next steps, if any, you think should come after the Ocean Climate Dialogue, and what your priorities are for 2021. Ambassador Prasad, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I presume you can hear me well. So thank you very much, moderator and excellencies and audience logged in from different parts of the world. I will not repeat myself. I made some remarks earlier, but try to make, I hope, some helpful comments to take forward our discussion. But what a fantastic initiative, the way in which you have framed our discussions this afternoon for me. And I think that lays a fantastic and very pragmatic and detailed platform for moving forward. My takeaway from the previous session was we need to move forward, one. Two, we need to try not to slide back, but we live in the real world. We will slide back, but try to lock things as much as they can so that we don't suffer as much losses on climate and oceans nexus that we have achieved so far. And the third is try to look at a bit more qualitative and quantitative leap forward using the anchor points that we have this year. So this is a great year for oceans and climate, for everything that we have been aspiring for. And as you have outlined, we should see the whole year as one integrated piece in which we can work in very systematic ways to lock in the progress and ensure that they move forward. What do I mean by that? Of course, we are in this COVID context. There's a lot of discussions in every country about stimulus, about green stimulus, about recovery, and there's a vast potential for cohesive and coordinated G7, G20 actions on blue recovery. And that discussion is, I think, not taking place right now, but it would be a significant add-on that we can bring from the side. To restore the health of the oceans, we need a step change in the actions in all the countries. I think we need a step change in pragmatic ambition, not ambition for the sake of it, but things that are practical. And I will again take a few moments to say how we in Fiji have come about in a very deliberate way. You made very generous comments about Fiji, but I want to say that we have been measured in the way we have taken forward our oceans commitment. It took us a time to understand what it is and how much we can do with oceans. And only this year we have locked in our commitments to 30 by 30 within the framework of 100% marine managed area across the whole of the geographical area of Fiji. And this is then translated into a oceans policy, which we are very close to concluding. It's a very advanced stages of consultation. And the oceans policy will write in these commitments, lock them into a whole of government and society approach. And then we take the next step. In parallel, we are taking the next step to make it easier. We will lock it into law, into a climate act, which will be, I hope, approved by our parliament sometime in the middle of this year. So that means oceans, we have taken time to understand what the blue economy is, what conservation space is, and how far we can go. We have brought the pieces of policy, regulation, and our domestic finances together. We have given it the legal cover. And then when it is locked into the NDCs, that becomes a the NDCs become an extension of very firm and very strong domestic commitment, which has whole of society buy-in, and there's an irreversibility to it. That may not be a model for all countries, but I'm putting it out there nevertheless, that that can be a way forward. And I know several countries, Ireland and Norway and New Zealand are perhaps in this space, and there could be a lot more discussions about how we bring this learning and this type of approach into the UNFCCC process. In addition to that, what are countries like ours who are challenged for capacity, for technical know-how, for better expertise, etc. How should we be looking at the international architecture and what they offer to us in advancing our oceans commitments? I think that's also, these discussions can very usefully be taking place within the UNFCCC process and in the allied processes that I've spoken about. One is, of course, on the technical side. We are talking within an adaptation framework, and I really welcomed the UN Secretary General's commitment that 50% of financing on climate should be on the adaptation side, which is very welcome. I hope our development partners take heed of that very strong advice. And any investment on adaptation side is saving many much more heartache as well as economic losses and devastation down the stream. And we are not talking in any abstract way. Over the last, since 2016, Fiji has experienced 12 tropical cyclones, of which 3 of them are in category 5. And the scale of the losses, the devastation and the human losses, the losses in the marine scape, in the land degradation, salination of coastal agricultural land, damage to coral reefs are substantial, unquantifiable, etc. So we know what this means. And as I'm speaking to you, we have just started recovering from a category 5 cyclone that hit us in December 17. But as of today, we are and we have just started the recovery process. As of today, we are anticipating another cyclone, which is forming and very speedily in the western part of the Pacific, which might cross Fiji again. And the loss and damage part of the oceans space can be reduced quite a bit if the global architecture and institutions that we have, such as World Meteorological Organization, International Maritime Organization, the science that is generated through the IOC process of the Decade of Ocean Science, can be brought in a more sophisticated way, in a more integrated way, to improve forecasting, in improving predictability, in improving the preparedness of our type of societies and economies over more medium term. And I think that would be a very useful investment as we go forward. Then you heard everyone speak, and I'll make that point again, that we are talking about the global commons. The oceans is a global commons. We will make progress. The only progress we'll make will be through collaboration and cooperation. And there is no front riders. I don't think that countries can lead exponentially on their own because of the way in which the oceanscape and the universe that we are talking about is interconnected. Now, why is that so important? One, if we locked in oceans and the climate and oceans nexus and a climate and oceans pathway into UNFCCC with very clear benchmarks and informed underneath by development in science and our understanding of new science as that evolve, and that are linked then to clear actions that countries are taking individually, etc., and countries are taking as a group, that would be the impact and outcome of that would be substantial. In a very practical way, we do not know today, I think, what is the NDCs, countries, and the ocean's contribution to either net zero or 1.5 if we combined and calculated all the NDCs together. One, because the blue component has not been incorporated in the way I think it can be. There's great potential. And two, that we bring the analysis together so we can begin to see the trend and the trend lines over the medium term. So I think in a very practical way, if we locked this into the UNFCCC process and we are beginning to calculate the ocean's contribution to 0, 1.5, wherever we want to be, that would be quite significant, but also a great opportunity for countries to learn from each other, and also a great opportunity for the analysts behind the scenes, and some of you are logged in, to improve the forecasting and the mathematics, the detailed mathematics that will go that is needed for this. In terms of, I liked what Senator Kerry also said about marine protected areas. So Fiji has made its commitment on marine protected areas, and the 30 by 30 and several initiatives are underway. We probably need to bring these together. But more than that, bringing them together, we need to begin to see what are countries, what are we as a collective group buying from all of the EEZs put together. We are, when we add up the exponential increase, I hope it will be exponential, and two, when we add up the conservation and biodiversity outcomes from it, it becomes larger than the individual pieces. And I think that the UNFCCC process should begin to understand that and begin to report on that in some well sequenced way. And so as we meet at future COPs, etc., we'll begin to see and get a lift from this from the exponential increase, but of the combined outcomes that are being secured. In a storyline, I think there's a issue I would, to all of us, to our community, I would also present that across this year, we need to have a very clear storyline of how oceans, what are we trying to achieve in the oceans and climate nexus. There is no way to climate action if ocean is not at the heart of it, and vice versa, the way in which Senator Kerry, for example, proposed it. And that narrative has to be part of the biodiversity discussions. It, of course, has to be part of the COP discussions. It's part of our discussions today, but equally, they should be part of the discussions of G7, G20, and some of the big events at which the finances of this is going to be discussed. We are on a path, a shared commitment to build back better. I do not want to throw more sound bites into it. Building back should also be part of building back. Blue should be part of the building back better. Fiji and our type of countries will be asking questions about building back, but with what? And is there blue finance that is being mobilized for the building back better part of it? And are we beginning to understand the financing that is needed for on the conservation side, which do not lend themselves to sort of commercial private sector and that type of investment so speedily. So thank you very much for inviting me to make some remarks. You have my written notes, which I'll share with you, which go into some greater detail. I very much welcome our discussion today, and I think we are at the cusp of defining, of really taking forward in a very substantive and fairly fundamental and transformative ways how we can bring oceans right into the heart, not on the margins of climate discussions and debate and processes and frameworks, but also in a way that we are making substantial progress each time we have discussions like this, and not recreating and going over ground that we may have already covered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Prasad. Ambassador Fuller, let's now turn to you. Canada has been one of the countries that's really worked to advance ocean and climate action beyond the borders of the UNFCCC. You made the ocean and climate sort of key pillars of the G7 presidency, for example. So wondering if you could talk about your priorities for the coming year, but also in your mind, how we can turn ocean climate aspiration into progress on the ground. Ambassador Fuller, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Gwen, and congratulations to Ocean Conservancy and the UN Foundation and all the other partners who came together to organize this summit. It's a pleasure to be here and participate with colleagues in this discussion. Certainly, ocean health and coastal resilience is a key priority for Canada. We border 3 oceans and we have the longest coastline in the world. So we are very committed to this issue and have in fact committed to protection of 25% of our ocean waters and 25% of our lands by 2025. And we certainly understand that integrated action on oceans and climate change is necessary. And that's why we joined the Friends of the Ocean and Climate Change and participated in the December 2020 Ocean and Climate Change dialogue to advance this integration. And this year, certainly it's critical for increasing our shared efforts to fight climate change. As has already been noted, we have to increase ambition on climate change to be able to improve the health of our oceans. And COP26 will be a key moment for countries to raise ambition and achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. So advancing ocean conservation and protection can be a key part of these efforts. And to support this, Canada sees the UNFCCC's technical work and bodies as valuable spaces for sharing knowledge and good practices related to the ocean climate nexus. I want to applaud the leadership of Fiji and Chile in catalyzing enhanced integration of these issues in the UNFCCC's technical work, and we will continue to support these efforts. I also want to welcome the UK COP26 presidency's emphasis on the topic of nature-based solutions, a topic which Canada led the work of the Global Commission on Adaptation, the focus on nature-based solutions in that context, which completed its work yesterday in the Climate Ambition Summit. And these efforts around nature-based solutions will certainly contribute to building momentum for integrated ocean climate action. I also want to recognize that a number of other fora and processes are advancing efforts relevant to oceans and climate change, such as the UN Oceans Process, the CBD, of course, the G7, the Commonwealth, and others. Raising ambition on oceans and climate change will rely on advancing our efforts across these different fora in a complementary way, ensuring that all the processes add value and aren't duplicative. It's also important to note, though, that ambition without action is not enough, and action requires investment, which is why I'm pleased to note that Canada's delivering $262 million to build resilience and tackle pressures on oceans, such as illegal fishing and marine pollution. And we're also working to crowd in private and philanthropic investments through, for example, our investment in the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, which is a partnership between governments, the insurance industry, the conservation organizations, and others that's advancing innovative finance projects. This includes, for example, blue carbon resilience credits in the Caribbean, mangrove and coral reef insurance, and the building of an ocean risk index. And AURA, as it's called, it also recently launched an innovation challenge to help further build out its project pipeline. So in closing, it's vital that we continue to cooperate multilaterally on ocean protection, on climate change, and on integrated efforts in these areas. And we look forward to working with our international partners to leverage COP26 and other key milestones this year and it truly must be an action on oceans. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Fuller. Sue Binias, let's now turn to you. We all know that ocean issues have been historically somewhat overlooked by countries in the context of the climate regime, particularly compared to other sectors. But as a key architect of the Paris Agreement, wondering if you could talk about whether there's a basis for ocean climate action in the UNFCCC and where you see ocean action heading this year as we look to COP26. Sue?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay? Great. Well, thank you, Gwen, and thanks to the other organizers for this great event. It's good to be back in the process representing a country, particularly a country that's about to become a party again to the Paris Agreement, and a country that as of, I guess, about an hour ago is now a friend of the ocean and climate. So to your question, we sometimes hear that the basis for ocean-based climate action in the UNFCCC or the Paris Agreement is the appearance of the word ocean in the UNFCCC among other carbon sinks, or that the Paris Agreement's preamble recognizes the importance of protecting ecosystems, including ocean ecosystems. But I don't think that's actually the answer. I think the answer is much broader. I mean, even if the word ocean didn't appear anywhere in those agreements, there would not only be a basis for addressing the ocean, but there would be an imperative for the regime to address the ocean. You know, as many speakers have said today, the ocean's inextricably linked to climate change on both sides of the equation. On the one hand, you've got greenhouse gases having a range of serious impacts on the ocean, sea level rise, acidification, warming, etc. On the other hand, the ocean is a source of climate solutions, from reducing shipping emissions to scaling up offshore renewable energy. So with or without the word ocean, it makes perfect sense and follows logically that parties are pursuing ocean-related steps under those agreements. Many parties are working individually to capture ocean-based solutions in their national climate plans, and many parties, such as the ones gathered here, are collectively working to raise awareness of the ocean climate nexus and to ensure that the ocean is even more thoroughly considered across the UNFCCC work streams. In terms of COP26, which you also asked about, it's our view that the recent SBSTA dialogue should not just be a one-off event without follow-on steps if we truly want to integrate ocean issues into the climate regime. So some parties have put forward ideas regarding the way forward. Some have suggested creating a new standing agenda item. Some have suggested a new work program, and some have suggested taking no particular action following the dialogue. We think the possibility that makes sense between these two poles, or three poles, if that's possible, is to create a recurring dialogue, such as the one that just took place, that would do three things. It would continue to advance the uptake of ocean-based solutions in national climate plans. It would help parties understand what kind of efforts are underway in other fora, in ocean fora, to address climate issues. And it would help ensure that ocean impacts and issues are appropriately considered in the various committees, work streams, and other initiatives of the UNFCCC. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. And if I may ask you a follow-up question. So the Paris Agreement is obviously the central global framework for addressing climate change, but climate issues are, of course, going to be relevant across other fora this year. So wondering if you could discuss a bit the sort of landscape of multilateral fora in the context of ocean and climate.
Sure. One of the points I took from the SBSTA dialogue in the fall is that ocean climate integration can't just be a one-way street, so to speak. In other words, just as the UNFCCC regime is looking for ways to better integrate the ocean into its work and into individual party plans, NDCs, adaptation communications, etc., so should ocean-related agreements and bodies be better aligning their work with climate imperatives. I'm still getting my feet wet, so to speak, concerning what's going on this year. I've only been on the job for 5 business days. So I'm not sure of every single linkage that's coming up this year in ocean-related bodies, but a few of them come to mind, and I'll put them into 3 different conceptual categories. So in some cases, the Ocean-Related Forum is explicitly working on climate change. In other words, to address or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I would put the IMO in that category. They're working to develop measures to implement the 2018 initial GHG strategy. There's much more that needs to be done to meet the strategy's long-term goals. There's a 2030 goal and a 2050 goal, and to work towards the decarbonization of international shipping. But that's an example of an ocean body that is directly working on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So a second category is one where an ocean-related forum may not be primarily addressing climate change, but its decisions could have climate-related implications or provide opportunities to advance climate issues. And I would put 2 examples in that category. The High Seas Biodiversity Treaty, BBNJ. The criteria, I'll give you one example from the draft text. The criteria for identifying marine protected areas could potentially include vulnerability to climate impact. So that agreement could be made more climate sensitive if the parties so chose. The second example would be the CBD post-2020 framework. It's not principally aimed at climate change. It's principally aimed at the protection of biodiversity, but various provisions that relate to the ocean, such as updating the Aichi target, could have implications for both climate mitigation and adaptation. And then the third category would be a case where an ocean-related forum might be undertaking thematic work to spotlight a climate-related issue. And an example in that category is the ICP in the UN. I'll spell it out because it's a very long, unwieldy title, but many of you know what I'm talking about. It's the open-ended, informal, consultative process on oceans and the law of the sea, or ICP for short. This year, it will be considering sea level rise and its impacts. So again, very kind of specific aspect of the ocean climate interface. So how do we make these things harmonize better? Well, of course, in my opinion, I guess the most direct way to do it is to for each country at the domestic level to harmonize its ocean policy and climate policy in relation to the positions it takes internationally, whether in negotiations or in meetings, to make the left hand and the right hand know what each other are doing and work together. Another option is for high ambition actors to keep in touch with each other and advance their priorities as they operate across fora. In other words, the Friends of the Ocean and Climate, which is a group that originated under the UNFCCC Paris Agreement, could set up some kind of way in which they keep in touch, so that when those countries are in some kind of ocean forum, they can send an alarm or early warning that some kind of climate related issue is coming up in the ocean forum. A third way to create better harmony or synergies is to establish regular communication at the regime level itself. In other words, for parties to the UNFCCC to have the benefit of regular readouts from these other fora like the IMO, the CBD, etc. This happened at the initial SUBSTA dialogue, and it's something that would be helpful going forward. A final crazy idea might be to have the COP and the UN Oceans Conference meet back to back. Thank you, Gwen, for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Sue, and I love the crazy idea. And actually on that topic, of the sort of overlap between the ocean and climate and biodiversity, we're now pleased to introduce a video message from Ambassador Stéphane Cruzat, the Climate Ambassador of France.
Ladies and gentlemen, delighted to be part of this Ocean and Climate Summit. The ocean lies at the heart of the climate system. It plays a critical role in the fight against climate change by absorbing almost 1/3 of the CO2 produced by human activities, while also being severely impacted by its effects. As such, an effective response to global climate change must integrate both an increased protection of the ocean and the use of the solutions it can provide us with. This is an integral part of Agenda 2030, with one of the sustainable goals, SDG 14, devoted to oceans. Science has highlighted the urgency to act. The IPCC report on the ocean and the cryosphere reminds us that a rise of the sea level is accelerating due to the melting of glaciers and the Arctic ice pack. The rise recorded over the past century has already averaged 12 to 21 centimeters. If nothing is done, it could reach more than 1 meter on average by 2100. Extreme events such as storms and cyclones are also more frequent. Without major investments in adaptation, coastal cities will be exposed to increasing risks of flooding, which could eventually lead to major human displacements. France is fully committed to this issue and is currently vice chair of the Platform on Disaster Displacement, which is chaired by Fiji. This is a grouping of states committed to supporting the protection of displaced people in the context of disasters and climate change, and it sits at the crossroads of several international frameworks: the International Organization for Migration, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. In 2015, France supported the inclusion of oceans in the preamble of the Paris Agreement and the request for a special IPCC report on the ocean and cryosphere. It also signed the 2 Because the Ocean declarations to promote better inclusion of the ocean into climate strategies. Together with the European Union, we supported the Chilean presidency in its endeavor to make COP25 a blue COP. We actively participated in the dialogue on the ocean and climate change organized as part of the UNFCCC dialogues at the end of 2020. France supports the strengthening of links between the UNFCCC and other fora dealing with the ocean under the aegis of the United Nations, in particular the Convention on Biological Diversity and the International Maritime Organization, where it is promoting an ambitious stance on the reduction of emissions from maritime transport. In the framework of the Global Climate Action Agenda, France is involved in 7 coalitions of stakeholders working at local level on ocean-related actions. It supports the Ocean and Climate Platform and its work in terms of engagement, knowledge sharing, and advocacy in favor of a better incorporation of oceans into national and international climate policies. Accelerated ocean warming and acidification are also endangering ecosystems, leading to an extremely high loss of ocean biodiversity. In this context, France promotes the use of nature-based solutions, which are solutions that are both effective in combating climate change and biodiversity erosion. These solutions are numerous and well adapted to the challenges faced by oceans. For example, France is financing the planting of mangroves in the Philippines, which mitigate coastal risks, floods, storms, erosions, and serve as a habitat for many species and store CO2. Together with Costa Rica, France recently launched the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, a coalition of 52 states and counting, committed to working towards the protection of 30% of land and marine areas by 2030 within the framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And we would like to invite you all to join this movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Ambassador to the UN, Rodrigo Corazzo Zeledón. Costa Rica has, of course, been at the forefront of leveraging ocean-based climate solutions in their national climate action, but it's also been instrumental both in the scope of leadership coalitions and also in the effort to elevate ocean issues in the UNFCCC. So wondering if you could speak to some of those multilateral efforts and what you would see as a successful outcome at COP26. Ambassador?
Thank you very much. We will lose the climate battle if we lose the ocean battle, said at the beginning of this task my dear colleague and brother, Ambassador Satyendra Prasad of Fiji. Well, let's see if battling the ocean fight, we can reverse the climate battle, which is gone into a situation of not only emergency, as called by the Secretary General today, but of absolute catastrophe. Costa Rica is very glad, very honored to host this ocean climate summit, and in the company of these 13 other nations, which are striving together in many fronts, and this is perhaps one of those examples. Because if I could sum my presentation to come in one sentence, or one word, I would say synergies. Today we have spoken, we have heard many instances of synergies being exercised by parties involved in these battles. I cannot be impervious, nor can Costa Rica, to the presence of the presidential envoy of the United States in this meeting, and of Ms. Sue Minias. Welcome back. I mean, you've been only 5 working days in the job, but you come already with crazy ideas. Let's have more of them, and let's welcome to the group. Yes, Costa Rica has been promoting spaces at the UNFCCC where the role of the ocean can be and is being underlined. Costa Rica's enhanced nationally determined contributions are connected with high ambition and advocate and promote the conservation of coastal and maritime ecosystems, such as mangroves, wetlands, and coral reefs. We are absolutely convinced that nature-based solutions are the way to achieve the 30 by 30 target of the post-2020 framework of the biological, excuse me, they're asking me to put my video on, of the Biological Diversity Convention, and Costa Rica is committed to this goal by, and here are some of those examples mentioned also in this meeting, co-chairing with friends the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, gathering like-minded fellow countries to achieve this agreement, hopefully at COP15. Last year, we led, with many other countries, the signing of a leaders' pledge for nature, which was signed in September by 60 countries, and now there are 84 and counting, yes, in which we precisely, or the leaders, the heads of state, strive for integrated action in climate, biodiversity, consumption and production patterns, sustainable patterns, energy, finance, and so on. Of course, we also strive together with many countries for the creation, for the adoption of a treaty of marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ process, which we believe should be adopted and ratified by member states. We, as mentioned by Minister Alleman, walk the talk, and we should all together walk that talk. There's many issues in which we are doing that in Costa Rica in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term, working alongside with our populations, which of course are maritime populations, which of course are the basic reason of action by the government in its relations with people. And we are working in that together with all these coalitions that have been made. And by walking the talk, we mean let's keep walking. Let's because the road ahead is lengthy, and we must go forward, not relinquishing an inch. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ambassador, and thank you so much to Fiji, Canada, the United States, and France for sharing interventions on ocean climate diplomacy in 2021. I'm now very pleased to introduce my colleague, Luis Esteves Salmeron, the Acting Secretariat of the Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Action Partnership. And Luis, over to you.
Muchas gracias, Gwen. Espero que me puedan ver. Gracias, Winnie, muchas gracias. Y gracias a todos. Y muchas gracias a todos nuestros distinguidos participantes. Para mí es un privilegio y un honor estar rodeado de un grupo tan distinguido de líderes que llevan la batuta trabajando en encontrar soluciones a la crisis climática y oceánica. Mi nombre, como Win lo mencionó, es Luis Esteves Salmerón y trabajo para el equipo de Relaciones Internacionales de Gobierno de Ocean Conservancy. Y hoy tengo el privilegio de contarles un poco más sobre la Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Action Partnership, o PROCAP, por su sigla en inglés, que es una coalición de actores basados en la cuenca del Pacífico que se enfocan en el trabajo sobre el nexo océano-clima. El 2020 fue sin duda un año muy complejo. Aquí en los Estados Unidos no solo tuvimos que lidiar con la pandemia del COVID-19 que trastocó la forma en que vivimos, sino que también estuvo marcado por un número récord de tormentas y de incendios forestales. Pero no quiero que piensen que estos impactos del cambio climático solamente han afectado a Estados Unidos. El cambio climático está empeorando los eventos extremos climáticos a nivel mundial y también aquellos que se manifiestan a través del tiempo, como el aumento de los niveles del mar, la acidificación del océano, hasta la redistribución geográfica de poblaciones de peces, entre otros efectos. Todos estos efectos, sin duda, han tenido un impacto devastador en las comunidades costeras en particular y en su forma de vida. Y por eso estamos aquí hoy, para conversar sobre ambición climática y acciones concretas. Entonces, ¿cómo luchamos contra el cambio climático? Bueno, esa es la pregunta más importante de toda esta discusión, pero una pregunta bastante compleja. Sin embargo, lo que sabemos es que no existe un actor singular. No importa qué tan poderoso sea, como lo han mencionado otros panelistas, otros presentadores, que pueda solucionar las crisis climáticas por sí solo. Sabemos muy bien que debemos trabajar en conjunto para producir una respuesta holística que incluya la participación de todos los sectores de la sociedad, incluyendo al sector privado, financiero, grupos de jóvenes, comunidades indígenas, entre otros. Y es exactamente por esto que durante la COP25 en Madrid, Costa Rica, Fiji, Panamá, Perú y el estado de California se unieron para dar inicio a esta coalición, a PROCAP. PROCAP es una iniciativa de carácter voluntario que reúne, como ustedes pueden ver, actores nacionales y subnacionales. pero que en el futuro se proyecta debería incluir a otras organizaciones, sector privado, gobiernos locales, gobiernos regionales, otros países, entre otros. PROCAP está trabajando para impulsar la ambición climática y la acción basada en el más grande y profundo océano del mundo, el Océano Pacífico. Los líderes de PROCAP trabajan de cara al cambio climático para proteger al Océano Pacífico y a los billones de personas que dependen de él y su bienestar. Y esto no es una tarea pequeña, considerando especialmente que la cuenca del Pacífico representa sobre el 60% de la economía global. Los miembros PROCAP se han comprometido, de acuerdo a sus circunstancias y sus realidades, a número 1, tomar acción contra la contaminación por carbono. Los miembros de PROCAP aumentarán su ambición para reducir la emisión de gases con efecto invernadero y comunicarán esta ambición en sus planes climáticos con la meta de alcanzar neutralidad hacia mediados de siglo. Esto incluye a través de aumentar la ambición para reducir el dióxido de carbono, para así combatir la acidificación del océano. Número 2, se comprometieron a tomar acción para la mitigación basada en el océano. Los miembros PROCAP maximizarán la mitigación relacionada al océano, como proteger y restaurar los ecosistemas de carbono azul, incrementar la energía renovable offshore, reducir las emisiones del sector de transporte marítimo, nacional e internacional, de acuerdo de nuevo a sus circunstancias nacionales y subnacionales. Y número 3, los miembros de PROCAP también se han comprometido a tomar acción por la resiliencia del océano. Los miembros PROCAP maximizarán las medidas de adaptación basadas en ecosistemas para crear resiliencia del océano y de los ecosistemas costeros y las comunidades y su bienestar, que se ven impactados de forma directa por los impactos de la acidificación, del aumento del nivel del mar y otros impactos del cambio climático. Y esto obviamente incluye reducir otros estresores en el océano. También incluye este compromiso apoyar la meta de proteger al menos 30% del océano hacia el 2030, apoyar medidas de manejo basadas en ecosistemas a través de la planificación espacial marina u otras herramientas de manejo integrado del océano para obtener un 100% del océano bajo su jurisdicción hacia el 2030. Los miembros PROCAP también incluirán estas acciones en mitigación y adaptación basadas en el océano en sus planes climáticos. A pesar de que el 2020 hizo el trabajo de la coalición un poco más complejo, como ustedes se lo pueden imaginar, la coalición de todas formas organizó una serie de eventos que permitieron a sus miembros y a otros actores intercambiar información sobre cómo impulsar la ambición climática y comenzar a planificar colaboraciones que permitan traducir esta ambición en acciones concretas para incluir al océano como parte de las soluciones climáticas. Ocean Conservancy, sirviendo como secretariado de PROCAP, lo invita a unirse a estos esfuerzos. Y quisiera cerrar diciendo que así como los líderes aquí presentes ya lo han mencionado, estamos en un momento crítico para la acción climática. En el 2021 es imperativo que los países incrementen significativamente su ambición bajo el Acuerdo de París. Y los países tendrán múltiples oportunidades para incorporar el poder del océano en la lucha contra el cambio climático. Nosotros estamos expectantes a trabajar con todos ustedes para hacer este superaño un gran éxito para la protección del océano y la lucha contra el cambio climático. Y con eso termino. Me gustaría presentar a mi estimada colega Mónica Dean de la UN Foundation, que moderará el tercer segmento titulado Movilizando una respuesta holística a la crisis climática, la participación de actores no estatales. Mónica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Louise. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Monica Dean, the Senior Manager for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the UN Foundation. It's my pleasure to be moderating our next session on mobilizing a holistic response to the climate crisis, non-state actor engagement. We stand at a crossroads. The climate, ocean, and biodiversity crises affect us all and connect us all. We need collective action and governments at every level, the public and private sector, NGOs, and philanthropy. We need to galvanize the collective action required to meet the climate, ocean, and biodiversity challenges. The next panel explores the role of non-state actors, youth, indigenous peoples, business and finance, governors, in moving us from ambition to action. The action we take or fail to take today will determine the kind of world we leave to future generations. I am pleased to be joined today by 5 leaders who are acting now for a better future. Our first message comes from the Governor of Hawaii, David Ige, who has been working to advance ocean climate ambition at the state level.
Aloha. Mahalo for the opportunity to join you today virtually all the way from Hawaii. Hawaii is the most isolated island community on the planet, 2,500 miles away from the nearest landmass, and we see the impacts of climate change and sea level rise in a real way. The people of Hawaii are deeply tied to the ocean through culture, traditions, practices, sustenance, and our economy. Coral reefs are the building blocks of Hawaii's coastal marine environment. Healthy corals and fish literally create our sand. They are the living habitat of our reef fish, protect our shoreline, and create our surf. Modern surfing comes from the sport of Hawaiian kings and depends on healthy reefs to create the wave breaks and the wind and wave currents that Hawaii is famous for. Visitors from around the world come to Hawaii to enjoy our beaches, natural beauty, and the world-class hotels. We have a kuleana, a responsibility, to mālama, to steward our natural and cultural resources. We constantly strive to develop innovative solutions to the challenges we face, and we also benefit from the knowledge of our neighbors in the Pacific and around the world. From 2013 through 2019, the Polynesian Voyaging Society sailed a traditional Hawaiian voyaging canoe named Hokulea around the world to carry this message that the ocean connects us, all of us, and calls us to care for our island Earth. That is why when our federal government walked away from the Paris Agreement, we were the first state to enact legislation committing ourselves to uphold our portion of the Paris Agreement, and one of the first states to join the U.S. Climate Alliance to better coordinate state-level action to move the country as a whole in a more responsible way forward. Since we set these goals and joined the U.S. Climate Alliance, the world has changed dramatically. As of last week, I'm proud to welcome President Biden, Secretary Kerry, and the federal government back to the Paris Agreement. And of course, the coronavirus, which is a wake-up call that we are a globalized society where our actions have direct impact on each other. Even with such a clear connection and such immediate devastating impacts from the coronavirus, we see the challenge of collective action to make the changes needed to respond to COVID-19. Ensuring that how we emerge from this epidemic in a stronger, more equitable, and more resilient manner is top of mind for all of us here today, and a lesson in how we must meet the climate crisis. Hawaii hosted the World Conservation Congress in 2016 to bring the world to Hawaii, to bring leaders in indigenous, place-based knowledge married with cutting-edge science so that our local communities and experts could meet and learn from them. During the World Conservation Congress, I announced the Sustainable Hawaii Initiative with 5 core goals that connect climate, mitigation, and adaptation with natural resource stewardship. The one specifically focused on oceans and our nearshore waters is our 30 by 30 marine management goal to effectively manage 30% of Hawaii's nearshore ocean by the year 2030. The Marine 30 by 30 goal relies on 4 main pillars. 1, place-based planning, which works with fishers and community members to expand our marine managed areas with a strong focus on community-based subsistence fishing areas. 2, the promotion of ocean stewardship, or what we call PONO, fishing practices. 3, restoration of our watersheds and reefs, and protecting our reefs from invasive species invasions. And 4th, scientific monitoring to track changes in our fish and coral. Also at that time, President Obama more than quadrupled the size of Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, making it at that time the largest land or ocean conservation area on Earth. That bold action inspired creating larger protected areas and contributed to the ever-growing global network of them. Efforts are now underway to designate the National Monument as a marine sanctuary, which would provide even greater protections from future federal governments that might seek to undo this. Internationally, we have joined the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification. Nationally, we are seeking to bring more federal support to coral reef conservation through pushing for passage of the Restoring Resilient Reefs Act. It would provide the most substantial federal assistance we've seen for local reef restoration in Hawaii to date. Locally, we see community members actively managing resources through community-based subsistence fishing areas and Hawaiian fish ponds. These areas protect and reaffirm fishing practices customarily and traditionally exercised for Native Hawaiian subsistence, culture, and religion, coupled with recognition from state government for local resident communities to help manage resources. With this global crisis, COVID, and the climate crisis, we have to find a way to come together. We can work together better through the alignment of local, state, national, and international action. My hope is that Hawaii can serve as a template that aloha can help the world to work together as a unified voice for better ocean stewardship and collaboration to better protect each of our unique environments and ways of life. Like the Hawaiian voyaging canoe, we are one canoe, one island, one planet. We are reminded of this more than ever and must paddle together, guided by keen navigators to achieve our goals together, to reverse climate change and sustain our oceans to help each other arrive at a more sustainable, equitable world for all of us. Mahalo again for this opportunity to share these thoughts with you today. I wish you great discussion and look forward to the next time that we can connect in person. Aloha.
Thank you, Governor Ige. Your leadership exemplifies how critical subnational efforts are to addressing the ocean-climate nexus and to achieving our global climate goals. From state leadership, I am pleased to move to someone working to build a global community for climate action. In advance of COP26, the UK has established a champions team focused on strengthening collaboration and driving action from investors, businesses, organizations, cities, and regions on climate change to deliver a successful COP26 outcome. At the center of that team is Nigel Topping, the UK's climate action champion, working to build this coalition. Nigel has shared with us the following message.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honour connecting with all of you today to talk about an issue of such critical importance, the ocean. As evidenced by the many distinguished speakers who've intervened before me, we're all well aware of the monumental role the ocean plays in protecting the planet against the impacts of the climate crisis. and our knowledge of the ocean's capacity to provide solutions to this crisis is growing day by day. However, these benefits do not come without cost, and we're witnessing the rapid degradation of the ocean, and its ability to perform life-sustaining services is under threat like never before. We're therefore faced with the dual tasks of both harnessing the power of the ocean to provide climate solutions and protecting and conserving its biodiversity and ecosystems at the same time. Now, the international community is becoming more and more aware of the potential of nature-based solutions to secure human well-being and achieve biodiversity benefits in the face of rapid planetary change. Delivering an inclusive and sustainable and responsible economy is one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. So as the UNFCCC's high-level climate action champions, it's mine and Gonzalo Munoz's responsibility to work with scientists, businesses and cities to drive action on climate change and to get the world committed to a zero-carbon resilient future by the 2040s. And that's why we've been calling for both a race to zero and a race to resilience. The conservation and regeneration of blue carbon ecosystems, which sequester carbon and support life, are key actions to our team, focusing on how to protect the ocean and harness its ability to address the climate crisis. Indeed, we have a whole community in the Marrakesh Partnership working towards this goal. We know that blue carbon ecosystems sequester more carbon per unit area than terrestrial forests, although protecting these ecosystems has not been prioritised equally in the policy space. So there's so much about the ocean that we still do not know. Together with Gonzalo and the team, we're committed to working with a diverse set of stakeholders to prioritise the conservation of these ecosystems and to better understand the potential role of other marine ecosystems and biodiversity in sequestering carbon. Rallying the private sector to commit to groundbreaking efforts which would transform ocean industries is also a priority. We know that what is damaging the ocean the most is the need for lowering emissions, and we're calling all sectors to commit to the race to zero, so that these ecosystems can continue delivering life, oxygen and food security to the world. This way, sectors like the shipping and the fishing industry will become more aware that the ocean is the major asset to their businesses and be committed to the protection of this ecosystem and its species. The UNFCCC's SROC report has been clear in underlining that a healthier, more biodiverse ocean offers the planet the best chance in combating the rapid changes it's undergoing. So I'm delighted to hear the efforts of different alliances like the Blue Leaders or the Globe and Ocean Alliance and the High Ambition Coalition, or even individual countries calling for an ambitious new target to safeguard the ocean and address the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. We must bring together all actors, communities, local government and the private sector. Scientists have recommended protecting at least 30% of the ocean to best equip it against threats and to build resilience in the face of unprecedented change. The UK has been leading the Globe and Ocean Alliance, a broad coalition of countries supporting a new target at the next COP for the CBD, to protect 30% of the oceans by 2030. I hope that more actors can follow the science and take this leadership even further by supporting the call to highly and fully protect 30% of the ocean. This would help ensure the establishment of a network of marine protected areas across the globe that are set aside from extractive industries, offering the ocean its best chance to rebuild and to gain the benefits of the mitigation power it contains. We must leave no stone unturned as we seek solutions to the climate crisis. The ocean, encompassing over half of our planet, is our ultimate tool and our ultimate salvation. I am truly encouraged by the hard work of our good friends and colleagues in Chile and the outcomes of COP25, which for the first time concretely mentioned the ocean in the UN Climate Outcomes document. This is a strong starting point for better incorporating ocean and climate policies. I look forward to engaging with all of you to urgently implement a suite of solutions which will activate all sectors in the most important effort of our lifetimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. We look forward to joining you in the race to zero and the race to resilience. We've heard how states and COP leadership are driving ocean climate ambition, and I'm now pleased to introduce our panelists to discuss how we can ensure all voices, concerns, and opportunities are being heard and acted on. Our first speaker is Florencia Flora Gonzalez, a member of Earth Echo's Youth Leadership Council, working with peers around the world to ensure a sustainable future. She's a bachelor's student in environment and renewable energy at the Siglo XXI University in Argentina. In 2017, she created a project called Ivy with the goal of raising awareness about the importance of the oceans between young people. This successful activity led her to gather a group of young men and women to clean some beaches around Argentina. Flora, thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm Flora Gonzalez. I'm from Argentina, La Patagonia, Argentina. I'm so grateful for the opportunity of being here today and for the emphasis you have placed on youth leadership in this work. My work in climate change, climate activism and ocean conservation started when I participated in conferences of youth from all over Argentina. We took training in order to find solutions to reduce climate change by observing what is going on in an international level and trying to find solutions for local communities. Nowadays, I'm serving as a member of Earth Echo International Youth Leadership Council with 26 incredible other young people from all over the world. I'm also working on Ocean Echo 30 by 30 campaign, engaging local youth to connect with their marine protected areas through water quality monitoring and advocacy efforts. I strongly believe that from small things proceed that which is great. And I'm certain that the youth have the power to change the planet for good. And through environmental education and actions, I know that a sustainable future can be built.
Thank you so much, Flora. I totally agree. I think we've seen just how powerful youth voices are in driving the change that we need. Our next panelist is Louis Porta, the Executive Director of Oceans North, a Canadian-based organization that supports marine conservation in partnership with Indigenous and coastal communities. Louis is also a Canadian member and the chairman of the Joint Public Advisory Committee, which advises the International Commission for Environmental Cooperation. He formerly served as lead political advisor to Mary Simon during her appointment as the Minister's Special Representative for Arctic Leadership. Thank you for joining us, Louis.
Thank you. It's my sincere honor to be with all of you this evening, and I am coming to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia on Canada's East Coast. So, while Canada as a whole has warmed twice as fast as the global average in recent decades, the Canadian Arctic is warming 3 times as fast, resulting in sea temperature increases, diminishing sea ice, restructuring of marine ecosystems, and increased industrial access, putting real pressure on the 53 Inuit communities found along Canada's Northwest Passage. The entirety of Canada's Arctic region is covered by constitutionally backed land claim agreements, modern treaties that create co-governance over all aspects of society, from health and wellness to education to marine action to climate action. Over the past 5 years, Prime Minister Trudeau has prioritized resetting and reconciling our relationship with Indigenous people alongside aggressive action to tackle climate change. This has resulted in many notable achievements. First, establishing an Arctic oil and gas drilling moratorium. Second, investing in the creation of a national Indigenous Guardian and Protected Area Network. And 3, surpassing our international marine conservation targets through unprecedented investments into Indigenous-led conservation that explicitly support community well-being. As we look to build on this progress and roll up our sleeves to meet and exceed the Paris Agreement, the Arctic continues to offer many innovative options for progress that can make a material difference and inspire other parts of the world to do the same. I'd like to highlight 3 categories of Arctic climate ocean action. It's difficult to say those words together. First, explicitly valuing, managing, and protecting carbon-rich ecosystems. Canada's Arctic has 2 of the world's largest irrecoverable carbon reserves, James Bay and the adjacent peatlands, as well as the Mackenzie Delta. Our commitments to carbon neutrality by 2050 are not possible if these ecosystems are disturbed. Second, protecting and rebuilding marine abundance and seafloor habitat protection. All life is carbon, and the Arctic not only has abundant populations of marine mammals and fish, it is also projected to have more as the climate warms. Third, reducing or eliminating global shipping emissions. Presently, the shipping industry is 3% of global emissions and is projected to grow rapidly. The shipping industry falls outside of the Paris Agreement, and present plans are not in line with our 1.5 degree goal. Two categories of action are necessary. Solutions that need to happen in the Arctic, like low impact shipping corridors, the expansion of the Ocean Conservancy Nike shipping pledge, and the heavy fuel oil ban. And solutions that need to happen for the Arctic, mainly decarbonizing the global shipping industry and bringing the International Maritime Organization in line with the Paris Agreement. We will not solve our climate, biodiversity, or COVID crises in isolation from one another. They are all rooted in human destruction of nature, and effective solutions will require deep, meaningful partnership and alliances with Indigenous peoples in the Arctic and around the world to ensure an equitable, carbon neutral, nature positive future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louis. I greatly look forward to discussing that a bit further with you in just a moment. Our final speaker joining this panel is Karen Sack, the president and CEO of Ocean Unite and co-chair for the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. Originally from South Africa, Karen now lives in the United States and has over 20 years of experience working for international non-governmental organizations on environmental issues around the world. She co-founded Ocean Unite in 2015 with Sir Richard Branson and Jose Maria Figueres, former president of Costa Rica, with the mission of strongly protecting at least 30% of the ocean by 2030 and building ocean resilience globally. Karen, a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you so much, Monica. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been absolutely fascinating to listen to the various discussions this afternoon. You know, addressing the various interconnected challenges we now face really requires new types of collaboration across the public and private sectors and civil society so that we all begin to swim in the same direction. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so motivated by the work we at Ocean Unite are doing with the global insurer and reinsurer AXA, the Global Resilience Partnership, the Government of Canada, and other bankers, financiers, NGOs, and governments, multilateral organizations through the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, or ORA, as Ambassador Fuller mentioned. ORA is a multi-stakeholder alliance, and it's pioneering finance and insurance products that incentivize investment into coastal nature-based solutions to build resilience to risk. We're pleased to have joined the Race to Resilience this week, and our aim is really to drive $500 million of investment into coastal nature-based solutions by 2030. To regenerate and revitalize coastal nature and the ocean, we need to stop thinking about finance for conservation and instead begin to align global finance with conservation outcomes that are carbon neutral as well as biodiversity positive. Getting to net zero as quickly as possible is absolutely critical to ocean health and a stable climate, as we've all heard today, but so is building resilience and investing in biodiversity positive outcomes that fortify adaptation. Yet despite the interconnectedness between a stable climate, a healthy ocean, and a resilient future, investments to protect nature and life in the ocean lag far behind those made to reduce carbon emissions and tackle the climate crisis. Just 3% of all climate finance is finding its way into nature. The Paulson Institute estimates that the total biodiversity financing gap could reach $600 to $800 billion each year by 2030. And that financing gap is even more pronounced when we look specifically at the ocean, where less than 1% of the ocean's total estimated value has been invested into sustainable projects. And that has been with absolutely minimal private sector financing. This is an unaffordable oversight by the international community because, as we know, coastal nature defends and protects some of the world's most remote coastal communities and many of our cities. Nature has been developing and refining engineering solutions for millennia that defend coastlines and capture and sequester carbons. We humans have been developing built solutions that do the same for a small fraction of that time. Of course, we think that ours are better, but they don't offer the triple bottom line that nature brings, being cost effective, having significant environmental, social, and economic benefits, and reducing exposure to climate and ocean risks. And here's just one example. You know, the median cost of building an artificial tropical breakwater is about 15 times greater than the cost of restoring a coral reef. And a healthy reef can reduce incoming wave energy during a storm by up to 97%. We're at an all hands on deck moment right now. And so bringing together our collective knowledge and strengths, we believe that we can tackle the hazards and vulnerabilities that communities around the world are facing, that we can build resilience and adapt to change at speed and at scale. But we have to have the public and private sector financing to do that. And Aura is really focused on catalyzing that action and driving financing into the space.
Thank you so much, Karen, for highlighting the need to invest in nature and especially our marine environment. Turning back to Flora, I just want to ask, so the youth of the world have been demanding action, holding their leaders accountable and getting directly involved in finding climate solutions and highlighting the value of those solutions. What role has the youth climate movement played in raising ambition in Latin America?
So the actions of youth climate movement in Latin America are key to mobilizing not only other young people, but also politicians. We are in charge of showing and amplifying environmental issues and looking for possible solutions to each one of them. We have replicated marches, action movements, and advocacy work around climate that have been taking place in different countries and resulted in new laws for our country here in Argentina. So I'm personally working on Ocean Eco 30 by 30. This initiative is led by Earth Eco International's Youth Leadership Council to amplify the collective impact of youth-led action to protect 30% of our world ocean by 2030 through education and advocacy campaigns, active engagement in ocean policy, and direct coastal habitat restoration efforts.
Thank you so much, Flora. Louis, you mentioned that Arctic-based shipping is both something that happens in the Arctic and also externally. I was wondering if you could go into that a little bit. As we know, the Arctic is one of the most rapidly changing environments due to climate, and that there are going to be increasing new challenges as the Arctic continues to change. So would you mind maybe illustrating a bit further what some of these challenges are, both from the environmental risks, but also some of the new opportunities that might exist in addressing this?
Sure, thank you. So when it comes to Arctic shipping, you know, North America exists because we stumbled upon it looking for East Asia. So when you think about how to manage an ocean that is emerging, and the retreating of ice means that there's access to a place that for most of human memory we couldn't travel to or travel within unless you were sort of indigenous to that place. And so how do we manage this increased interest? And I think the answer is pretty simple, and it builds on what Karen was starting to talk about in her work, which is that we simply put, we work strongly to disincentivize mariners to avoid sensitive areas, marine mammal populations, indigenous travel and hunting locations, and reduce the risk of impact of pollution events. We do this by integrating and incentivizing action and investments across all levels of society, public, private, and indigenous, to create low impact shipping routes, which with effective management that avoid high risk areas, data deficient routes, minimize interaction with ecologically and biologically significant areas, and consider whether the growing conversation about a carbon border should apply to Arctic shipping more broadly. The bottom line is that this is an area that needs focused attention, and it will only do so if we work together to achieve it.
Thank you so much. I have a feeling Karen might want to jump in on that in a second, but Karen, I'm still stuck on that figure you mentioned in your opening remarks, that only 3% of finance is flowing to nature, and that of that only 1% is going into the ocean. I was wondering if you could maybe illustrate a little bit more. I mean, we know that a lot of our nature-based solutions are going to provide 30% potentially of climate mitigation. But so much of what we do is we talk about nature-based solutions that are terrestrial. Reforestation and agriculture sort of stand out as big investment areas. Where are some of these opportunities for ocean-based investments, and maybe do they include the Arctic?
Thanks, Monica. They absolutely include the Arctic, and actually I would add to that the Antarctic. I think in thinking about nature-based solutions, we so often separate what requires funding and financing and innovative financing from what requires action from governments. In the Arctic and in the Antarctic, which is another place on our planet which is warming faster than anything we can even conceive of, we need to establish very large climate reserves, marine reserves that are climate reference areas, places that are strongly protected for our planet, and that add into that 30% total. When we think about some of the innovation in finance and insurance, the focus at the moment is really on coastal habitats like mangroves, seagrass beds, salt marshes, and coral reefs. And there's a lot of innovation taking place, like insurance for reefs or mangroves, building blue carbon resilience credits that complement NDC commitments. But there are also really interesting intersecting opportunities, like investing in offshore wind that is coupled to more protected areas built into financing instruments, or looking at microfinance tools like life insurance or financial literacy to help small-scale fishers and fish workers escape debt traps. That also incentivizes marine protection, similar to what Louis was talking to. We also are looking at how we can build on the work that's been done on green bonds, so that we're not creating a whole new asset class on blue bonds, but we're actually building on what's been done over the last 7 to 10 years. And we're building our blue into that green. The bottom line really is that none of these tools are that new to the finance and insurance sector. What's new is the innovative way that we can deploy them into the blue space, and the collaboration that we need from organizations working in the ocean space, as well as finance, as well as multilateral organizations and governments, so that we can all work together to get this done, to replicate action, and to get to scale as quickly as possible.
I think one of those areas where we need to get to scale and get to action is continuing to find a seat at the table for youth. Flora, and looking forward, where do you see opportunities for the youth climate movement to support ocean climate ambition, and how can we, as leaders in this space, better support you?
So, as far as I'm concerned, the youth climate movement has opportunities all over the world to support ocean climate ambition. This can be done in collaboration with NGOs, international organizations, and foundations that are working on giving the necessary tools to achieve environmental issues and solutions. So, while the ocean is one of the most negatively affected by climate change, it's also a powerful source of solutions that have the potential to provide a fifth of the greenhouse gas emission reductions that are needed globally to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So young people are the ones who are leading these thousands of projects to protect our environment. And already active on climate issues, young people can greatly propel efforts to ensure we focus on ocean-based climate solutions.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to having youth voices advocating for ocean and climate. Louis, back to you. We talked a little bit about Indigenous communities in the Arctic and how they're on the front lines of the climate crisis, but they're also a big part of some of the solutions that we're seeing. What are some of the lessons learned from those communities? And similarly, how can we better support sharing their knowledge?
Sure, thanks. So maybe I'll try to respond in this way. In the Arctic, in Canada's Arctic, Inuit people and their ancestors have lived there for millennia. And the climate has changed rapidly over that entire time. So there is an inherent resilience within Indigenous communities. And we can support them by showing up in their communities, asking how we can help, listening, advocating for the full implementation and expansion of treaty rights, and equally valuing Indigenous knowledge in all decision-making. We can also reflect on examples that show alternative economic opportunities that can create prosperity and give people options. And so 2 years ago, the Prime Minister Trudeau announced the creation of Canada's largest park in the water, a national marine conservation area called Taritu-Umunga. And that came with a record $250 million investment into communities that fostered and supported their own sustainable relationship with the ocean through building small craft harbors, to creating guardian programs, to building science capacity, to doing management and monitoring over that place, and many other ways. So I think we can look to where we've been successful and we can continue to push our own ambition.
Thank you so much. Karen, picking up on that theme, the most vulnerable are often the most at risk from the ocean-based climate impacts we've been discussing today. What needs to change in order to ensure that these groups are receiving the financing necessary to adapt to these growing challenges and to do that quickly?
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, I mean, the people really at the coalface of dealing with the climate emergency are most dependent on healthy ecosystems. And it's just the bottom line is there's no more time for us to be penny wise and pound foolish or continue to invest in destructive activities. We're faced with the challenge and the opportunity now to build back stronger by both investing in a sustainable future and divesting from an unsustainable past. We have to make sure that more climate finance is invested into natural solutions. France has proposed that 30% of climate finance is invested into nature, that measures with the amount that nature helps to mitigate climate impacts. So that nature gets a slice of the climate finance pie. And we heard earlier that earlier this week, the UN Secretary General suggested 50%. At the same time, the climate finance pie itself needs to get bigger with larger commitments and less bureaucracy and process behind its deployment so that it can be moved quickly and effectively, transparently and affordably into the communities that are most at risk.
Thank you so much. And to wrap up our panel, I have one final question to all three of you, and we'll start in the same order. 1 year from now, what will success look like to you? If you could advance one thing in the ocean climate agenda, what would it be? Flora.
Well, I would say support. I think that success comes with the support of people all over the world. And something in the ocean climate agenda that we could advance on would be the protection of 30% of the ocean, engaging countries to commitment, increasing and growing the movement, working on the opportunities we have in our cities and communities to action in favor of our environment. For any young people to turn that are here who would like to join us in this work, I would recommend you to visit earthecho.org, that they are working through these different topics and they are engaging young people to grow and also take care of our environment.
Perfect. Louis, What would you like to see 1 year from now?
Okay, just in 1 year, we'll see how ambitious we can be in a year. I would say that I'd like to see other large wilderness countries follow Canada's lead and join the High Ambition Coalition so that we continue to have the best potential to protect the largest amount of biodiversity around the world. And I think that also we need to recognize that we have to begin to value natural carbon and recognize how at risk we are if we do not manage this unmanaged carbon and work with indigenous people who have been the stewards and the guardians of these ecosystems and this carbon since time immemorial. Otherwise, what we'll find out very quickly is that our accounting may be correct inside of Paris, but the earth will tell us differently.
Great, thank you. Karen, final word over to you. What would you like to see 1 year from now?
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to say what the two speakers have said before, and you know, the key thing really is if there isn't the financing to get this done, if developing countries do not see the global north put the money on the table for investment into adaptation and resilience and mitigation, we stand a chance of not getting anywhere. And so we need the public sector and the private sector to step up. It would be great to get that 30% of climate finance allocated to investment into nature, and corporates also being required to disclose both their climate and nature footprint so we can understand how their investments are not taking us to that plus 4-degree trajectory that former Secretary Kerry mentioned, but instead aligning to the 1.5 degrees that we all need to see.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate you all highlighting the important role that youth, Indigenous leaders, the Arctic, finance, nature-based solutions, it all has to work together in order for us to reach our overall climate target. So thank you all for joining. Our final speaker in our panel is Lorelei Picourt, the Secretary General for the Ocean Climate Platform, which was created in the run-up to COP21 to advocate for a healthy ocean and a protected climate. The platform now brings together an international network with 90 members from the private sector, research institutes, aquariums, NGOs, and other national and international entities focused on addressing the ocean climate biodiversity nexus. Lorelei is also co-focal point for the ocean and coastal zones for the Global Climate Action Agenda under the Marrakesh Partnership. Lorelei, over to you.
Thank you very much, Monica, for this kind introduction. Good afternoon and good evening to everybody. First of all, let me thank the UN Foundation and Ocean Conservancy and all the partners for organizing this very important event. It's an honor to be here with you live from Paris. We have heard today a lot of important statements, with a dozen of countries taking the stand to recall the urgent need to protect the ocean to actually deliver on the objectives of the Paris Agreement. It's heartwarming to begin 2021 with such strong commitments to the ocean and climate nexus. But of course, we know that the road ahead remains long and steep, and we urgently need to start walking the talk to follow in the footsteps of Chile. In this past panel, beautiful panel, if I may say, we have heard some very concrete and inspiring examples from Landsat actor engagement and demonstrated leadership, especially from our youth friends. As the clock is ticking, it is more important than ever that all civil society actors continue to join forces, sending governments a resounding signal that NGOs, scientific institutions, businesses, cities, investors, we're all united in shifting to a decarbonized economy. And the Ocean and Climate Platform, together with its 90 members, we will continue to work to this end as we have since COP21 in Paris. And we can't say it enough, but the very best thing that we can do for the ocean is to drastically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And of course, in the broader global discussion, we must not forget that the ocean is at the crossroads of all the challenges facing humanity today, from climate change to biodiversity loss, the energy transition, international trade, food security, labor, and now we know very well our health. The ocean is one of the very important keys to the sustainable future that we must build. It's also important now to recall the significant progress that has been made on the ocean and climate front over the last 5 years since Paris. And many speakers have mentioned this before me, so I won't go into details, but first and foremost, with the publication of the IPCC Special Report on Ocean and Cryosphere, which was a game changer for the ocean. In the last couple of years, we've also launched some global discussions on ocean and NDCs and other mechanisms, and these are now becoming very concrete. In 2019, we had the Blue COP in Madrid under the Chilean presidency, which resulted in the final COP decision, mandating the secretariat to hold an ocean and climate dialogue. We had that dialogue last December, and it identified some of the gaps and opportunities to strengthen ocean climate action throughout the UNFCCC. So if we take a minute, in just 5 years, that is tremendous accomplishment. And an important consideration here is also that every step of the way, civil society has played a crucial role in shaping these outcomes and also in supporting parties in scaling up their ambition. And today, in the spirit of scaling up ambition, it is also my pleasure to share with you that the Ocean and Climate Platform is developing a new work stream on the impacts of climate change on coastal cities and their need to anticipate and adapt to sea level rise and extreme weather events. So watch out for announcements in the coming weeks. As we have heard today, there's growing momentum for ocean issues worldwide. And more importantly, here, there's a growing dialogue between decision makers, scientists, and non-state actors. So in light of this renewed mobilization, non-state actor engagement is still fundamental. So to conclude, I just would like to recall that within the climate forum, civil society has a leading role to play as part of the global climate action agenda under the Marrakesh Partnership, as was mentioned by our climate champion, Nigel Topping. And since June last year, I've had the privilege of being co-focal point for the ocean and coastal zones under the Marrakesh Partnership, together with my esteemed colleague, Tamara Thomas from Conservation International. And now it is in that capacity that I invite all of you today to reach out to us, to join the global climate action agenda in boosting concrete actions and in stimulating innovative partnerships. Our voices are definitely stronger together, and it is together that we must embark in a race to zero emission, which is a race for hope and a race for a sustainable future. And I believe that especially resonates within this ocean and climate community, because the ocean is not just a victim of climate change. It's a source of solutions to tackle the greatest challenges of our time. So thank you very much, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion today and tomorrow as well.
Thank you very much, Lorelei, and thank you to all our panelists for illustrating how important it is that we all work together to achieve a blue-green future. It is my sincere pleasure to turn the event over now for our final session to Lisa Spear, the Director of the International Oceans Program at NRDC. Lisa, take it away.
Monica, thank you so much. And thank you to the organizers for doing this, and to all of you for staying with us through this day, which has been incredibly inspiring for me. In the interest of getting some of you to bed, some of you to that second cup of coffee or afternoon tea, we're going to jump right into it and with our final two speakers of the day. First, it is my pleasure to introduce Ambassador Yusra Khan. Ambassador Khan, you have been instrumental in an instrumental force in the ocean and climate space, especially in the Friends of the Ocean and Climate, including when it came to achieving the COP25 decision text, which contained for the first time an ocean section in a COP decision. Looking ahead, would you talk a little bit about what your priorities are for 2021? Thank you. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Lisa. Dear colleagues and distinguished delegates, it is indeed a great honor for me to speak for you on the Ocean Climate Ambition Summit. This title for the final session of today, Looking Ahead, 2021 as a super year for ocean and climate, is much more relevant in the sense of the pandemic COVID-19 is just like a awakening for even further realizing it. to embrace with our commitment to reduce emission. The year 2020 has been a difficult year for all of us, with the COVID-19 pandemic affecting development, our economic growth, and climate action. It should have been the year of action, following the result of the UNFCCC COP25 in Madrid, December 2019. However, we must follow the global consensus that climate action and sustainable development is the new normal, the foundation of our collective recovery and build back better. I would like to reiterate that the role of the ocean and its sustainable use and conservation should be part of the global response to climate change and considered within the implementation of the Paris Agreement in both mitigation and adaptation efforts. We have engaged in the Ocean Climate Dialogue to consider how to strengthen mitigation and adaptation action back in the 2nd and 3rd December 2020, which is a crucial step in mainstreaming ocean climate nexus into the UNFCCC process. We recall that it focused on several key areas: promote more ocean climate change science cooperation, aligning ocean climate nexus in other international process, enhancing and supporting regional contributions and efforts into the overarching goals of climate actions, exchange of the best practices in the ocean adaptation. Before this dialogue, Indonesia hosted the Archipelagic and Island States Forum 5th Senior Official Meeting and 3rd Ministerial Meeting in November 2020, which pushed for a stronger role of blue economy and leveraging it into achieve the SDGs and recovery. Along with other members of the high-level panels for sustainable ocean economy, we also launched the Transformation for a Sustainable Ocean Economy in December 2020 that seeks to become a guidance for better, more sustainable ocean and maritime management to achieve SDGs, particularly SDGs 14. Dear colleagues and distinguished delegates, even more recently, we have followed the Climate Adaptation Summit Online 2021, in which leaders asserted their commitment to climate action in adaptation on equal par to mitigation effort. We must seize the momentum of these leaders' call for action and capitalize their commitment to further adaptation action, particularly ocean-based climate adaptation. Ocean-based adaptation effort in Indonesia is included in the Ecosystem and Landscape Resilience Focus Area, with the main programs of coastal zone protection and ecosystem conservation and restoration. Additionally, due to the many communities whose lives depend on the ocean and are the most vulnerable to its change, adaptation efforts need to be combined with social management to increase community resilience in locations prone to impact of sea level rise. President Joko Widodo of Indonesia iterated the importance of community empowerment in adaptation efforts, such as fishing community and coastal communities. We have heard from the Honorable John Kerry, United States Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, on the United States' renewed commitment to tackling climate change. Following this encouraging development, we should recognize the United States as a leader in ocean science and engage the United States as a partner for ocean science in cooperation and collaboration to further address the ocean climate nexus. We also note that UK presidency of COP26 has made nature-based solutions a priority use. This is an opportunity to further ocean-based climate actions, in particular using nature to enhance resilience of coastal ecosystem and habitat, as well as making strides in building scientific research into blue carbon. Ensuring the ocean climate nexus stays in COP26 discussion is our immediate priority. Following up the ocean climate nexus of COP26 and beyond, I want to emphasize the need for enhancing science cooperation, filling in knowledge gaps with regard to the ocean climate nexus, and giving more mandate for the IPCC for further research and analysis related to the link between ocean and climate. Let us maintain our close cooperation in this forum, but also stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And last but not least is we welcome the remarks of Minister Teresa Ribera, who has been Spain's Minister for Ecological Transition since 2018 and Spain's Deputy Prime Minister since 2020. And she also, this is a fun fact, was identified in the magazine Politico as the green engine of Europe. And she was identified as one of the 28 top European leaders in terms of doers and influencers, as they call them. So Minister Ribera's remarks will play right now. Thanks.
La relación entre océano y clima está bien caracterizada, la conocemos, debemos seguir profundizando en ese conocimiento, pero sabemos que no hay un océano seguro si no hay clima seguro, sabemos que no hay clima seguro si no hay océanos sanos. Y es una relación que requiere de las sinergias de acción climática seria y contundente si queremos evitar el incremento del nivel del mar, el incremento de la temperatura. Tenemos que trabajar desde tierra para evitar la acidificación o la aportación de sustancias que desde tierra limitan, perjudican la biodiversidad marina. Forma parte de las acciones en las que lo local, lo regional y lo global es fundamental que estén bien coordinados. Y eso es a lo que se compromete España como país que se ha sumado a la iniciativa de los líderes azules, Blue Leaders, con un 30% de sus aguas jurisdiccionales protegidas correctamente, con una vocación de comprometer un incremento también en la protección de aguas internacionales, como esas aguas de la Antártida, que merecen el reconocimiento de 3 áreas marinas protegidas adicionales este año, que precisamente se cumple el 30 aniversario del Protocolo de Madrid al Tratado Antártico. También necesitamos proteger el Mediterráneo, un mar lleno de vida, de riqueza, de cultura, de historia, y que sin embargo es el que más presiones tiene desde su orilla. Una actuación de las comunidades climática y oceánica conocida desde hace tiempo y que se plasmó definitivamente en el Acuerdo de París con el lanzamiento de esa iniciativa Because the Ocean, que sigue los pasos de la Global Ocean Initiative, de la Global Ocean Commission, pero también las recomendaciones del IPCC, un informe especial sobre océanos y clima que nos debemos tomar muy en serio. Esta es la década del océano y la biodiversidad, y 2021 el superaño, en el que la acción climática y la protección del océano debe centrar toda nuestra atención. Esperamos que a final de año podamos hacer honor a las recomendaciones del informe del PNUMA sobre el gran gap que existe en materia de adaptación a los efectos del cambio climático y concluir las negociaciones para poder contar con un tratado internacional que proteja la biodiversidad más allá de las aguas jurisdiccionales, un paso más de la comunidad internacional que resulta indispensable.
So that was excellent and a good ending to this day. We've heard a lot of urgent messages today, and a couple have stuck out at me that I just wanted to summarize. The first is that there are the need for urgent action is totally clear, and that 2021 really does offer us some real opportunities to advance. In the UNFCCC space, there it seems to be an increasing awareness and a growing recognition of the various ways in which the ocean can contribute to important opportunities for action to address adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. The Ocean and Climate Dialogue is in the process of determining how best to implement those actions within the architecture of the UNFCCC framework. But it's very clear that the dialogue will be the beginning and not the end of that process. In the ocean space, similarly, 2021 offers us huge opportunities. The first one, as Minister Ribera just spoke of, is the new High Seas Treaty, which gives us a once-in-a-generation opportunity to advance both climate and ocean protection and conservation. This very important treaty is due to be done within the next year, and we are very much looking forward to seeing a robust agreement that provides for not just ocean biodiversity protection and conservation, but also, as Sue Biniaz earlier in the day remarked, there are places in that negotiated treaty that where we could do a better job in including climate. So that job is in front of us. And we heard a chorus of calls for protecting 30% of our ocean by 2030 at the CBD COP in Kunming later this year. In addition, there's been a little more attention on not just the quantity of protection, but the quality of protection. As the blue leader countries, many of which spoke today, they have called for fully and highly protecting 30% of our ocean by 2030 as a way to ensure that, as Secretary Kerry said in his opening remarks, that protection really means protection. So with those observations, we'd like to move to the next phase of this summit, which is the nitty-gritty of how we transfer the high-level messages we heard today from ministers and ambassadors into concrete steps. So we're looking forward to seeing you all again tomorrow, same time, same place, to delve into in much greater detail how we're going to get there. Thank you.